I need one. Mine disappeared.
I agree with you.
Hey there.
I always forget to order one and then
How's it going?
With a
I
K?
get everybody else.
C.
Right. It's always a K, right? If it goes
Deb
to
and I've
odd
decided that our
different than
computers-
normal, the C.
Our keyboards
My guess is somewhere
Are too
down the
far
line,
up.
someone wanted to
And
make
so
it
you're
not
up here
look
the
so
whole time.
Jewish.
and your
My
wrists
guess.
are really high.
Why else did it get changed
You
to
just
a
sit
C?
and it's like empty.
I don't know the official
By the end of the
reason,
day,
but
the main
Oh
thing is
man, that's like by now tonight.
underlying guess.
Yeah, or something like that.
I don't know,
They could do
Kaplan
little
is the big.
wrist supporters.
Could have put a D if you
But mine just, mine
That
gets
would've
cut
been
off for
Kaplan.
circulation.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's the way I
I know, it's
ideally
bad.
should be.
I know you should have them up more
How's
than I
it
know.
going to you? They're almost done with that construction over there on the whole corner by your house.
28, yeah, it's pretty much done. The landscaping is not grown in yet, but that'll be years before that's in there. But, yeah, I haven't seen any kind of construction equipment there for quite some time. But
It seems like there's always some little thing. They were
Yeah.
doing something on one side, and I drive by, and there's something on the other side.
probably on the east side, down below, you know, there's
Right, I
stuff.
thought you were in
Mayor,
the
it's gonna be
middle.
Oscar.
Yeah, I'm off on the right as you head into Boulder. I'm on the right. On the left, they're doing stuff on the east side of the.
There's your siren.
Oh,
Oh, there's the
you are on the
siren.
west side?
Yeah.
I thought you were in all the new housing over there.
No,
Okay.
we're on, right, actually, right next to our house is back in there, next to the Elks Club.
Okay.
Fairly close to the Elks Club pool.
So is this the time, they don't do this year round? Because we hear.
Just April through
August.
August?
August, first Monday, 10 a.m., 7 p.m.
Okay.
But then Bill knew that.
And then I
But I had to be reminded.
It kept you off guard this morning.
It always is, you know. Keep you honest.
This clock must be slow.
Right? What are you guys doing after a break?
Yeah.
And that's a relative term.
I was just thinking I must come to the right meetings and with no audience, no audience here. I don't have to worry. I was gonna come to that one meeting where they were all speaking from the,
St. Brain
so,
Marathon?
yeah, so I was like, oh, I'm glad I didn't come to.
Oh, you couldn't even get in?
I wouldn't.
So that same thing.
Staff?
Present.
Trustee Farrell? Present. Trustee Travis?
Present.
Trustee Waugh?
Present.
Trustee Miller? Present. Trustee Brown?
Present.
All right, we have a quorum. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thanks. We'll take a brief reflective moment of silence, please. All right, thank you. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Sorry, I can't see the button.
I'll move to approve tonight's agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. And the agenda is approved, 7-0. Thank you. All right, we'll turn it over to Sergeant Christ.
Okay, so I think as most people know, we had a pretty bad accident last night up the North St. Vrain. I am happy to report that the family is going to survive. The little boy that was choppered out is still kind of serious and critical, but he'll be okay. So they were all banged up pretty bad, but they all will survive. So that on the heels of last week, we had a fatal in the same area. So I want to thank the staff and a lot of people that reach out to the sheriff's office and us guys just to check in. It's obviously we get to front row seat to some nasty stuff out there. So that's that. We're gonna do drug take back in the spring and fall again this year. Last year we did it just in the fall, thinking that we'd get more people coming down for a one-time event, but we decided to move back to twice a year, so that'll be April 27th, and I have a meeting tomorrow to get some things set up, and I'll bring that up to Kim and everybody so we can get that posting out for Drug Take Back Day. I've been talking via email with Ian about some traffic calming stuff again for this summer. So we're gonna try to brainstorm some ideas, and we're gonna meet May 13th at their meeting and go over some options and ideas and see if we can't do something maybe a little bit different or whatnot, and see what everybody's got going on there. And then I came. Last board meeting I was really sick, so I had to miss that, and I had scheduled to bring in Deputy Loya, our night shift guy, that to introduce him to the board, but hopefully I will bring him in on the 15th. I'll check with his schedule because he doesn't normally work, but he wants to come in and see everybody, so hopefully I'll do that on the 15th, and that is all I have.
Any questions for Sergeant Christ? Well, pass on our thanks and condolences to your staff for having to go through a couple of rough weeks. But I'm glad to hear that the family is going to ultimately be okay.
Family's
So
gonna
thanks for
live,
sharing
and,
that update.
You know, it's just, it's safe driving. If we're just safe out there, we won't have to do this.
It should be so simple.
You would think. And I'd be out of a job. Which would be a good job to be out of.
Well, we can find some other things for you.
All
I'm
right.
sure.
Sounds good.
Happier things.
Dogs off.
A never-ending issue.
That'll never end.
Okay, all right, we'll go ahead and turn it over to staff.
Tracy's report flood recovery update.
Okay. We'll start with the public works buildings. Those are moving along quite well. The replacement building, which you probably can see just driving by, we've got the walls up. They're starting to put the trusses up, so that's coming along great. And then the ops building, they're working on the foundation. We're also working to get main utilities out to the site, gas, electric, communications, and we will be putting in a water line here in the next week or two. So you're going to see a lot of lane closure there in that area to get all those utilities to the site. Second Avenue Bridge, the 30% design has been in FEMA's queue for quite some time, but I have been contacted by FEMA and they are now reviewing that 30% design. So hopefully a couple more weeks we'll have an answer and be able to move forward with 100% design on that project. Bone Park Phase 1, we had some rework of some fishing structures that we needed to complete, so that started today, and that's over in the Bone Park area, and we should have that completed by the end of the week, and then that will be a completed project with CPW. And then Bone Park Phase 2, where we're putting in the ball fields and the skate park, Walsh Construction has started mobilizing this week. And the skate park may start sometime towards the end of this month. They might start working on that. And then the Lions Valley River Park ponds, moving right on schedule. And they're almost complete with sculpting out the ponds and getting ready to start with the landscaping portion of it. As far as the whitewater features, the October hole, we had some concern or issues with the terracing on the October hole. We're working with a design consultant on that, and they should be taking care of that within the next week or two as well. And the Apple Valley Waterline relocation, we received some additional funding, so that project will be moving forward. And so we've started our final design, and probably will be going out to bid for that project at the end of April, but won't start construction on that until early June. And the Eastern Corridor utilities, we did receive good bids on that, and we are just holding, the apparent low bidder was CGRS. However, we can't award that until we have that BOD permit for the wastewater treatment plant. So CDPHE is reviewing their request for information that they asked for from JVA and the town, so that's in review. And once we get that permit, then we can award the bid to CGRS. And then the Ped Bridge at 3rd and Park, my understanding that should be approved through FEMA and HMGP here in the next week or two, so I'm waiting for an approval letter from them, and then that will be hopefully a summer project that we can start. And that's most of our major projects that we're working on in recovery.
All right, any questions for Tracy? Trustee Caravas.
Thanks, Tracy.
Sure.
I see that on the consent agenda, there's like all you almost on there, you and Sergeant Chris. So did a lot of work this week. A couple of questions. The flood recovery, and this might be also mainly towards other staff also. On the 4th Avenue, can we put out an e-blast or something, kind of given the timeline and why it's going to take more than maybe a year to actually get started and get it done? As you mentioned last meeting, it's going to be, we got to go through the budget.
Itself?
Yeah, what to say. Just there's some grumblings down in the confluence that, moving too slow, why don't you do it? So it's just kind of slowly educate people that it's, just because we got agreement, just because we got the approval doesn't mean it happens overnight, that it could take 18 months plus to line everything up. So we kind of start adding those and every other e-blast stuff just to do that type of thing. So the bank stabilization, Lions Valley River Park, is that on our town property? What piece is that? I always forget.
When you're talking about CDBG DR money?
Yeah.
That's the stretch of stream bank just downstream from Highland Ditch diversion, the big diversion structure, where probably the deepest cut we saw in town, probably a good 15 feet.
Is that in Keith Bell's old property?
Part of it is Keith Bell and part of it is us.
Okay. Because I think you've received emails from some people are concerned, some people in the ecology board are.
Sure.
Because Keith Bell turned down money from the St. Vrain River, one of the coalitions to do it, and then we buy the property and we're going to end up spending money to repair. So I was just getting clarification of how much is actually ours and then that we actually bought the problem.
Mr. Bell owns the immediate property adjacent to the buildable property, but then the town is responsible for the portion going into the bank and the north side of that stream bank. So, and we also have a responsibility of, regarding erosion to those homeowners around that area as well. And I have responded to the individual you're referencing and explained that they're both the same pot of money.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter which cycle it came out of, it still is CDBG DR funding, whether or not he used it, someone else did last time. And it will be up to the collaborative if they want to support this.
Okay. And one more, Bone 2, do we have the additional cost yet?
No, he's supposed to have it by Wednesday.
Wednesday,
We're meeting with them Wednesday.
Yep.
Okay. Could you send that out to me in an email when we get that, or ask to the board so we know? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll go ahead and move on to the administrator's report.
Thank you. A couple of updates.
Push that off.
Yeah, you turn it on.
Okay.
The new executive director of DOLA will be here on Wednesday. Mr. Garcia, Rick Garcia, used to be the director of HUD and was recently appointed by the governor to executive director of DOLA. So he's taking a tour of the northern Colorado region and we'll be in Lyons, and we'll be meeting here in the boardroom between 1:45 and 3:30. So any elected officials, and of course the public, it's open. We have a brief presentation for him based on our recovery to date and what we have left to accomplish within the time frame. And then he wants to take a tour of the proposed housing sites, the two bridges, and Bone Park. So he wants to look at the remaining projects. He didn't want to look at Apple Valley right now, but there's a lot to look at. But he'll have a fairly short time, but we do encourage folks to attend if they can. As well, we also have on Sunday, I don't know if this has gotten much publicity yet, but it should very shortly. Some of our newly elected officials and re-elected will be at Oscar Blues Community Room on Sunday from 3 to 5. So I believe we'll be seeing Representative Singer, Senator Neguse, and Mr. Fenberg.
Neguse is a representative.
Oh, he's a representative. I'm sorry, Representative Neguse and Fenberg.
Yeah, Senator Fenberg and Singer State. Neguse is federal.
So they'll be there from 3 to 5 on Sunday for an open, kind of a open town hall sort of thing, just come and meet the representatives and share concerns or whichever you would like. So that will also be happening this week. We did receive notification from CDOT that they will not be issuing a letter of concurrence for our DRCOG applications for TIP funding for the 2020 through 2023 cycle. We had submitted 2 applications, one for Broadway Avenue improvements and one for the St. Vrain Trail extension that we originally had planned and ran into some bumps with ditch crossings. And so at this point, it means that we will not be considered for funding for those projects between 2020 and 2023. And then they usually start those funding cycles like the year before again. The St. Vrain Trail extension is still listed on our CDBG DR unmet needs list. So this is something, if there is some additional funding, we would like to talk with Mr. Garcia while he's here. We could still maybe look at that from a different funding source. Broadway Avenue improvements, as you know, we've been looking at those for many years, and it never seems to quite rate as high as we hope with CDOT funds, only because CDOT wants to move traffic along and really doesn't encourage parking. And we have parking on both sides of that road. So, but nonetheless, at this point, we have been notified that they will not be issuing a concurrence due to some paperwork that should have been completed during our Main Street project that did not get completed in a timely fashion. And I am working with personnel involved on that to remediate the situation.
So just a question, would it make any difference if Lyons were to take ownership of Broadway in terms of finding funding for improvements that we want to do to that stretch?
From the regional perspective, we still have to have a letter of concurrence if there's going to be any federal funds. So
not for the letter of concurrence. I'm just saying if that became a stretch that the town actually took ownership of versus CDOT.
They still get rated in the same pool, so this was all part of the regional rating. So there are sections in Longmont that Longmont owns, and Louisville and Lafayette that they were still had to have that to even make the first threshold of considering the applications. So
yeah, I'm just saying, I guess if we funded it ourselves.
If we funded it ourselves.
If we funded it ourselves, is it getting knocked down a bit? I think CDOT doesn't want to slow the traffic down, I guess is what I'm saying. And so are we coming up against some
if we owned it and maintained
pressure that we wouldn't have if we could do it without?
I can ask that question when I follow up with the CDOT staff later this week and find out. I'm not sure how that works within.
Yeah, I don't know how, because I think even if we had the funding, we would still need CDOT's support
I think we do
for the.
because they still have to, it's still their.
Right,
highway.
because it's their highway. Just a food for thought.
Sure.
I mean, seems a little bit less onerous than the Main Street portion, possibly, for the town to take on.
Yeah. Tracy, you didn't mention the EDA bid, the sewer line. You did?
The CGRS.
Oh, CGRS.
Yes.
The, if you recall, the sewer line construction for the East Corridor went out for bid once, and the bids came back over $1 million above the engineer's cost estimate. They went back out for rebid a month later, and we now have, we had 4 bids, and it is now under the engineer's estimate. So that's why we're able to move forward with that as soon as we get our concurrence from CDPAG. I do want to make the board aware that we are really facing some really significant challenges right now out in the Eastern Corridor trying to get the water line to the new site. And when I say significant, it has consumed hours and hours of staff time. There are 10 utilities within that right-of-way easement on the north side of Highway 66, right in front of our new site. And literally, the pictures, the lines have 6 inches between them, and there's just not enough room to tap and splice and do all of these things we are needing to do. So we have spent significant time trying to come up with other alternatives. It has to be re-engineered, has to be approved by the fire department, etc. So right now we have a large water tanker out there as our temporary fire suppression while those 2 buildings are being constructed. Our goal is to have the new hydrant out there by April 15th, but it will be extremely high pressure for now until the pressure reducer valves are put in during the sewer line project. So it's very complex, but you are going to see lots of road cones and construction out that way while we are trying to maneuver between many different jurisdictions, utilities, lines. It's pretty amazing, actually, that there's that much in there. Happy to say that we have conducted numerous director of finance interviews, and we have a couple more candidates tomorrow, and then we're hoping to wrap that up and be able to make an offer by midweek. So that's good news. In the meantime,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do have a question. To go back to the water line challenge there and the construction, just looking ahead, because it is already April, traffic starting, what kind of anticipation do you imagine that there would be a lot of construction cones and perhaps congestion there?
This month.
Okay.
And then when they start the sewer line, I believe they're further off the road. So
off the road, so it wouldn't necessarily impact. Okay.
There'll still be some because they need parameters to move around. But everyone is aware that after Memorial Day, things pick up here, and the water line will definitely be done this month. So that should
okay. All right. Thank you.
Anna continues to come in on the weekends during her transition, so that has been really helpful to us. The other big news, well, not news, but announcement, I just want to remind people that April is the month to renew dog licenses in town, and it is an expectation that if your dog is out in the public, it needs to be licensed by the town, and April is reduced tag month, so come in and get your dog tags and get your dog signed up so that if he gets away from you, we might have some idea who he belongs to. That would save you some money from going to pick him up elsewhere, him or her. I don't really have a housing update this week, but I do expect by our next meeting I should. Summit is hoping to finalize their tax credits, and it sounds like their surveying as well is complete. The architects are at work on a design to submit to the town to start that development process, and that will happen as soon as they get those tax credits wound up. So if you've been out there, you'll start seeing more and more stakes, and at some point when it's closed, we probably will see that road starting to be closed off. So that will be a little change for our public. And then the next Saturday, it's this Saturday, the International Film Festival. We want to make sure people know that is happening in Lyons all day on Saturday. And you can go out online to coloradofest.com to check on that, but it'd be great to support local artists who are into film, as well as the Town Hall Art Show. Again, art can be delivered this Friday, art show Saturday evening.
All right, any other questions for staff? Trustee Browning?
We budgeted this year for a couple of curbside limb pickups, and since spring is here and the winds maybe are dying down, any idea when the first that might occur?
I think they're working with, do you want to come up?
Sure, we talked
About spring cleanup, I think.
the SFC had a spring cleanup meeting.
Right.
The SFC had a spring cleanup meeting on Thursday night, and we talked about that because compost and yard waste is part of spring cleanup as well. And the thought was, based on transition and sustainability coordinator role and getting somebody on, and the spring cleanup days, is we would probably do that later in the summer.
Okay.
So, and we were granted 2 from the county.
Yeah, I mean, part of the purpose was to pick up all the dead limbs that accumulate from the winter winds. So, and I guess it could reduce it, I suppose, because if people take them to the spring cleanup, then there maybe is less in early summer. But early summer is the target date.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
I guess that would be summer.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, one consideration might be to do a pickup in conjunction with the spring cleanup, especially for senior citizens and others who may have difficulty getting their material down to that.
Is that something that we're going to maybe?
That's a good suggestion.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for staff? Mike, Trustee Caravas?
Victoria, how are we doing since last meeting on the business licenses of those that aren't following the rules and paying up?
I have not actually received a formal update on that because the code compliance officer's been helping me with the CDOT compliance. But I can certainly provide that to you at our next meeting.
Fair enough, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Anything else? Okay, great. We'll go ahead and move on to audience business, and this is the portion of the meeting where the public is welcome to address the board on topics that are not on tonight's agenda for a public hearing. We do have a public hearing tonight on Ordinance 1056, and we'll take public comment at that time on that ordinance, which is regarding Lyons Article 8, Chapter 2 of the Municipal Code to revise the boards and commissions provision. So if you're here to speak to that item, please wait for the public hearing, which will be next on our agenda after I make an appointment to the board and commissions. Otherwise, you're welcome to address the board on any other topic. Each person will have 4 minutes. Give your name and address for the record, please. Would anyone like to speak during audience business?
Aaron Kaplan.
List here to go with.
We're very official now.
You have to push the button. Oh, you can do it yourself. Aaron Kaplan, 1007 Steamboat Valley Road. I guess I was just here maybe to emphasize or to request an emphasis on the basics, as I would call it, or utilities. It seems sort of moot after listening to some of the stuff there, but to understand that the utilities are involved in everything, and maybe because the utility board is never coming to really request funds for any projects, that it may not always be seen as something there, but to really try to understand that it's involved in everything basically you guys are working on, anything from the housing to business. All of it seems to have some underlying aspect of the utilities. And in particular, I was going to come request some direction or emphasis. We've been waiting to do the electric meters RFP It was talked about last fall, and it got delayed, and then finance becomes an issue, and it was always something, and yet we're still going around. So I really wanted to see if there was anything we could do to try to get the RFP out for the electric meters, understanding that it's not, I mean, I know staff is busy. I'm fine waiting on anything from them because I know they're overwhelmed. But then I start to see we've had a lot of talk on the single hauler, and that I hope everyone just understands what might be involved in that. I didn't see too much reference to what it might cost for the administration portion, that was set to the side. It seems like we still have a lot of questions to our utility clerk to answer. When the new stormwater fund came on, we wanted to see what properties were involved, what properties the town had that were do not have utilities and yet should be paying the stormwater fund. I don't think we have an answer to that. That it seems like there's already a lot out there. I don't know if the plan was to create a new fund for waste. I mean, right now we call the sewer fund the sanitation fund. Hopefully we'll rename it sewer, and then you can call sanitation for the garbage if that happens. But to understand that there's going to be a lot involved there, and I hope we're looking at that, and that I don't see myself, and as someone who I think has some experience in it, how we can ask staff to take on any cost, anything involved in that. And there's been a lot of time involved in that. And like I say, we're still looking at things. We had stormwater looked at in the 90s. We just did another fund. We have a lot involved. We should focus on projects that are 4 or 5 years old rather than, I'm just really surprised that the single hauler had as much as it has on a topic. Again, if it's just trustees and volunteer time and the sustainable futures, that's fine. But if we're asking staff to be involved, I just think there's a lot more in the utilities that we could do, and I would just like an underlying everyone to try to think about how much they're involved in all aspects of things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For audience business, is there anyone else signed up?
Coco?
Okay.
Tall person. Still on?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Coco Gordon, 523 Fifth Avenue, and I wasn't planning on saying much about the single hauler because sustainability-wise, it's the poorest choice, I think, with having no bids for 3 years and no competition and forcing people into doing something that may be not necessary at all, and possibly put the effort into composting program instead, things that are much more larger for the future instead of now. Okay, but what I came to talk about is the notice that I read about the incoming weed mitigation service coming in. And I'll give out my little 2-pager because I won't be able to read it all. But I just wanted to say that I heard about it through a friend who knows chemistry and explained how the chemicals work that are going to be used. It's a company that is organic, but as Barney has suggested, even on his farm, organic farm, they suit up for some organic chemicals when they use them. And I think it's very, for me personally, and I'm only speaking personally here, not for any group, as an elder, living right in the middle of downtown, where every place I go, I like to walk. I don't like using my car. And it would make me live a totally different life once I know that I'm going to be compromised by anything that's being sprayed that's chemical around me that I have to walk through. Last summer, I walked through Sandstone Park in the middle of the summer, and by the time I got in the middle and the overwhelming smell of the chemicals got to me, and I couldn't get out of it because I was in the middle. I needed to fly out, and I couldn't. When I got home, I had a rash going from my feet all the way up my legs for weeks. And I'm very sensitive to chemicals. I'm personally speaking to you. As an artist, in 1965 was my first bout of chemical poisoning from the materials I was using as an artist, and it's never stopped, never really abated totally. It's gotten a lot better when I don't have chemicals around me. Don't use medicinals, just everything very homeopathic and the least amount I can, and try to keep safe that way. And it's harder and harder to keep healthy these days. Trying to get rid of something I've had now for about 6 weeks that's going around, and it's very, very hard to stay healthy. And I can just really feel for the children, the pets, the wildlife, the air, the water. We want to keep it all safe, and it's all around us. We can't get away from it. We're right here in this little bowl. It's an amazing place. It's beautiful. But if it gets us sick, what good is it all that beauty? So I don't know how much I want to read of this because I don't have much time, but I just wanted to say that I never realized the seriousness of the consequences of using particular organic chemicals until this friend sent me what the composite was made of and how it reacts around us with all the living beings, and that I thought from my own organic garden, I would be safe, yet I'm so exposed because I'm right in the middle of where all the spraying is going to be done. I'm worried about that. And there's a huge, all over the United States, call to stop another one that's not being used here, but similar, an organic chemical, which is hard to pronounce, chlorpyrifos, I can't remember exactly how to say it, but it's used all over for fruits, all the fruits we eat and vegetables, and I think it's very dangerous, and really be very careful before you do this, and try to remember what we really, really want is to live with organics around us and make it possible. We can all make it possible. It's really true.
Thank you, Coco. Would anyone else like to speak at audience business? I don't know if you have anyone else signed up.
No, that's all.
Okay, if you didn't sign up and would still like to speak, you're welcome to come forward.
Go ahead.
Sure. Hold on. Let Coco finish passing this out.
Yeah, I don't know if I have enough. We can make more.
We can get copies from, Deb can make sure we get them.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I think you have enough.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dave Hachmonji, 200 Wild Court, and a member of the Sustainable Futures Commission. I want to thank the board for once again bringing forth this discussion around a single hauler pay-as-you-throw issue. I know it's a very tough decision that you're making. Be it that the SFC, your commission, we really studied this quite a bit over the past almost 6-9 months, and this is the single best strategy that the town of Lyons has to meeting its aspirational waste reduction goals. And I want to thank you for bringing this up again.
Thank you. Anyone else for audience business? Okay, we'll close audience business. We don't have a board and commission report tonight, but I would like to make one appointment if the board is amenable to that. Steve Smith contacted me originally to be part of PCDC. He has only lived here a short time, and we actually filled our PCDC openings at the time, but we do have an opening on the Board of Adjustments, and so he was amenable to serving on that board instead, and it's a good way to maybe get oriented to our town code, and I think he'll be a nice addition. We do have an open seat currently on that commission, so if the board has no objection, I'd like to appoint Steve Smith, and we will let him know he's been appointed tomorrow. All right, that's all I have on that. So the next item on the agenda is the public hearing for ordinance 1056. If the clerk wants to introduce the item.
Ordinance 1056 is an ordinance of the Town of Lyons amending Article 8, Chapter 2 of the Lyons Municipal Code to revise the town boards and commissions provisions.
Okay, I don't think we have a staff report for tonight. I am going to open it up for additional public comment, and then the board can continue the discussion that we started last time. Is there a sign-up sheet for this one, or no? Okay, so I'll go ahead and open the public comment period. If you're here to speak to ordinance 1056, you're welcome to come forward. Each person will have 4 minutes. Give your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Ava McCall. I live at 1111 Fifth Avenue here in Lyons. So today, me and my peers are here to talk about a youth council that we hope to be making, formerly called a Youth Advisory Commission. So I kind of had this idea a few months ago because I'm committed to CSU. I want to study political science, and I thought, like, there isn't a lot of great ways to get engaged with our town government. You know, we hear about it in the Town of Lyons thing, and, you know, and I really wanted to find ways to actively not only engage myself in public hearings like this and local government, but also the students of Lyons. And I think that it would be really beneficial for all of us. One thing that I kind of noticed, I'm a senior at Lyons, and one thing I kind of noticed was a trend for our local scholarships was that the essay was like, how can you make a contribution to your community in the future? And I thought, like, oh, like, I love volunteering, like, I love service and stuff like that. I was like, of course, like, I can come back and teach other people. And I was like, but how am I going to do that, like, alone? And I thought, this youth advisory commission would be such a great way to get everybody involved. I thought people graduate from Lyons, they go off, and, you know, they don't really tend to come back. And I feel like if we were to engage in a youth advisory commission within, like, on a commission and the board, I felt like it would actively engage youth within our community to come back and give back to our community, because not only is it like I was a part of our local government and the decisions that we made, but it was also like I learned how to become a leader, and I learned how to engage with adult conversation and just learn about local government. And I think that's a really, really beneficial thing for our community, because, you know, we sit here at the town meetings and you guys talk about things that, like, affect us in the future. You know, it doesn't only affect the people that live in this town, but the people that, like, go to school in this town. And I thought, you know, what a great way to, like, spark that kind of creativity and engage everybody to just, like, want to be and stay in Lyons, because it truly is such a great community. And, like, I've lived here all my life, and it's just really important to me that, like, I learn more and I'm prepared for a career in the future. So I really hope that you guys will vote yes to my youth commission, and thank you for having us.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak to ordinance 1056?
Aaron Kaplan, 1007 Steamboat Valley Road, and after hearing that, I would just say I fully support that. I think that would be a great idea. As the chair of a board and somebody who's brought their children here once or twice, I think having a youth board would be a great idea.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, Charlie Gow, Lyons, Colorado, 98 Deer Hollow Court. I am a sophomore at Lyons Middle Senior, and I think that we should have a student advisory commission for a few reasons, which are both benefiting the town and the students. The town would get an opinion on issues it is facing from a new perspective, which is our youth. The youth perspective can be validated because at this age, people are required to go to the commission is an age at which individuals are able to make mature decisions. Their perspective is also important because it makes up for 1/4 of our population, as that's all of the students. Youth benefits from being involved in something they're interested in, is it allows them to make social connections, learn new skills, and have some good background if they want to pursue a political career, such as Ava is. Involving the youth in an outside activity also benefits them as a student, as they are more likely to have no excused absences, not skip classes, and have higher GPAs, as well as more success in life as an individual, according to a study conducted by the National Center of Education Statistics. I personally feel like I would be a good candidate for this because I'm connected with the sophomore class as their president, and I'm friends with many of them as well. And I'm personally interested in this because I just like to learn more about the town itself and how it runs, and I think it would be a great thing for students to be a part of that. Thank you. And I urge you to please vote yes on the Student Advisory Commission.
Thank you so much. Would anyone else like to speak?
Hello, I'm Olivia Cope. I live at 340 Vasquez Road. Being a junior at Lyons High and going here since preschool, I have gotten to see many things and grown up in such a great community with such a great board that has helped recover us from the flood, obviously. And seeing all of this and then also seeing what is happening more nationwide, I've just always wanted to get into politics, especially lately in the last year. And so I plan on going to study political science and then moving on to law school. And currently I am doing a lot of things that involve government, like writing speeches and going to certain programs and camps to prepare me for that. And when my friend Ava, who I've known my entire life and who has always come up with these amazing ideas, brought this up to me, I just couldn't think of a better idea to include students like me who already know that they want to pursue a future, but also students who aren't sure what they want to do and maybe lean them towards the direction of getting them involved with government and helping not only our community, but also our nation as a whole, because all in all, it's pretty great, you know what I mean? So I figure it can only get better, and especially including people like kids who don't really know what they want to do yet in such a welcoming and friendly and open-minded program that only benefits. I mean, I can't really see any downsides to it. It would just be an amazing addition to our town. So I think that I would really appreciate it if you guys voted yes. So thank you.
Thank you. It's being recorded.
It's being recorded.
That's such a bummer.
Sorry, Colton, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Colton, 555 Moss Rock Court. So I'm Colton, I'm a senior at Lyons, and I'm actually attending Stanford University next year. And I've been really involved with the Longmont Board of Education, just the St. Vrain Board of Education, and they actually have a student advisory council where the students meet with the board. And I've been able to see firsthand the benefits of students being able to talk to board members and the board members being able to hear the student perspective and the student idea, because the whole idea is not just giving students a voice, it's more giving students the power to use their voice. I'm also on the Longmont Multicultural Action Committee, and one thing that a lot of boards are doing now is just including at least a couple students at their board meetings. I sat in at a Board of Education meeting, and it's just a really good way to get students involved, get students' voices out there. And I'm also student body president at Lyons, and I've seen kids that have ideas, which I've seen as great ideas that could happen in the town, but being a kid going alone to a board meeting, that's super, super intimidating. And I think this is just one great way for kids to be able to get their voice out there and be able to make an impact on the town. So I really hope you vote yes, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, and congratulations on Stanford. Anyone else like to speak?
Coco Gordon, 523 Fifth Avenue. Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to have a new type of liaison to the boards and to the BOT. Why not? You'd probably get a lot of good feedback and a lot of new information that we're not hearing because we're not talking to each other all the time. And I would suggest that. Make a new way of having student liaisons on the boards.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Joseph Lekarzik. I live at 3885 Northbrook Drive in Boulder. just this morning, driving up here to work, I heard that there's a piece of legislation in front of the state legislators to allow 16, 17, and 18-year-old kids to vote in elections that pertain to school boards. And I thought that was a very interesting proposal. And then lo and behold, tonight we had these kids coming up here who want to get involved. And apparently some of them already are. And to tell you the truth, I have my doubts about whether or not this piece of legislation is going to pass muster at the state level, but you guys have an opportunity tonight to be on the cutting edge and start it here.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Christy Cope. I live at 340 Vasquez Road in Lyons, and I may be repeating everything my daughter said, but I missed it that much. I really support what the kids are trying to put together and what they're trying to do with a student advisory committee to the board. They have so many great ideas, and there's so much energy. And I just know from watching my daughter be involved in the St. Vrain student leadership program, from starting the debate club at Lyons, and from being very involved in wanting to get into law and politics as a career, that this is a great opportunity for these kids who have an interest and who are natural leaders to learn about the process and to be involved in the process at this young age, so that as they grow and develop their careers, they really have something that they can go back to, that they can put on their resume, and they can really find out early if this is the kind of career that they want to commit to. And I think starting early and having a voice and having that voice be heard would be a phenomenal thing that we can offer our kids. But also I think that our town would really reap great rewards, because they have a lot of energy, and these are just brilliant, brilliant kids. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public comment. Thank you. So we had started in on this ordinance at the last meeting, and we continued it. I don't know if the attorney could help me remember where exactly we left off. We'll continue to kind of go line by line. I forgot to make a note in my document. I know we voted on the term being C and D. Maybe we left off, I think we got through C of 2840. I am not sure if we went any further than that. Or did we talk about the not completed 1 year? So I think we did do that as well. Yeah. Okay. Oh, we did do 62 about the meeting place. Sorry. So maybe we're to the actual commissions themselves. Did we get through the whole front end? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I think we're on 2860. I think we got that up. I had something I wanted to propose, and we got
Okay, maybe we can continue with anything. How about if we just say anything above 281110, which gets into the actual commission. So if there's anything else in the front section, let's address those items, and then we'll move on to the commissions. Trustee Browning, did you want to start?
Yeah.
I think, sorry, I wasn't looking this direction.
That's fine. He can go first. But
can you'll have to turn off yours.
Right.
So that I can.
They said they wanted
I
everybody
think
else
we may be doing the same sections. Fine, she goes first.
Okay, Trustee Farrell, we'll go to you. Can you turn your mic back on? Sorry. Okay, thanks.
So, okay, so I wanted to talk about section 2860. Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that I found that the red lines didn't seem to be very comprehensive. I actually ended up having to put what's online and the red line next to each other and go almost line by line to find some stuff. So I almost have a sense that before we even approve this, we should see a very comprehensive red line. So that's just some feedback. So on 2860, one of the things that I've come across at the Arts and Humanities Commission is perhaps people that vote by email. And that I know we're not supposed to vote by email, but I don't see anything actually written in the code.
I mean, the requirement that, this goes back to the open meeting laws of the state of Colorado. They're statutory and separate and apart from the codification of the town's code, for whether it be for the Board of Trustees or any other advisory board or commission. Those laws really only apply if there's some sort of appropriation of funds behind them. But I agree with you that any board or commission, regardless if they're appropriating funds or not, should not making any sort of decision outside of a public meeting. And we can certainly put that in this code, but it should be a principle they should be following regardless of whether it's in this code or not. And if people are not doing that, they should receive additional training either by me or from town staff as to how to properly conduct public meetings and make decisions.
Well, so with that, I was thinking that perhaps it would be a wise idea that we insert, I was going to recommend, and if there's a better place to put it, taking current B and making it become C and inserting a new B section to read, and I hope everybody has a copy of it. Boards and commissions may vote only on issues during public meetings in order to comply with public meetings and public notice. Boards and commissions may not vote or make decisions on any issues through email or electronic forms of communication.
And is that consistent with the document you've provided to town staff?
Yes, exactly. And if you want to tweak wording, that's fine with me.
Well, they can't have discussion. So I think town staff would recommend one additional change in that no discussions be held online as well.
No discussions.
Yep.
So anything that is related to anything other than funding would also be included in no discussions for issues.
Nothing should be discussed online. The only sort of online communications that should occur, and we've just, I think, discussed with this board and several other boards many times, is informational meeting, information from staff or from the chairperson of that board or commission. Anything else should be sent to no more than 2 members of that board or commission. And so I think if we're going to make this explicit within the code, we should probably also mention that as well.
Is that a motion to amend?
Yes, so I make a motion to amend the wording and the additional wording that you just said.
Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Discuss.
The only clarification I would ask is that if we're okay with the attorney and staff making any changes that are needed to make sure this is clear,
yes.
I fully support it. I think it's helpful for the boards and commissions, even though we talk about the open meetings law. It's one of those more difficult things to grasp. So I think putting in this section makes it really clear what we're asking them to comply with. So I think it's a good proposal. I'll support that. Any further discussion? Hearing now, I'll call for the vote on the amendment. And the amendment passes 7-0. Thank you. Next item, next amendment. Trustee Browning.
Yeah, my proposal that I'm passing around also had to do with the section 2860. And just in reading through this, I don't think the existing language or, with the changes quite accurately describes practice on boards and commissions. It says that, for example, all actions taken shall be by recorded roll call vote. Well, this board does that, which is appropriate since we're elected officials, but I don't believe that that's the practice at most town boards and commissions, that they have roll call votes and record them at every time they take a vote. In fact, it's for expediency and time's sake, it's usually a aye or yay, and a lot of things are done unanimously. So my question is whether that should be in there if it's not really being followed. And also, it said minutes should be kept. It says they should be furnished to the town clerk within 7 days, within 1 week, actually, it says now, of the meeting. I don't think that happens very often. And it also says they'll be furnished to the town clerk for transmittal to the Board of Trustees. Well, we don't get those. We might or might not read all of them if we did, but it seems to me the most important part of minutes being done for boards and commissions is that the public be able to look at them and see what was discussed or voted on. And similarly, it's the existing wording was that action minutes be kept at each meeting, and I'm not quite sure what those are. To me, that would mean just minutes only of things, actions, either actions that were going to be taken or actions actually done at the meeting. And so, as this read now, if they spend an hour discussing something, but don't actually vote on it at that meeting, for example, defer it to the next meeting, no need to reflect that in the minutes. And I don't think that I think whatever a board discusses should be at least reflected in the minute that discussion was held of, issue A or something like that. So I tried to come up with some suggestions that would reflect both what the actual practice is and also I think what it should be in terms of anytime there's a vote or discussion that ought to be reflected in the minutes. 1 week to get the minutes to the town clerk seems pretty short to me for volunteers usually at most of these commissions who are trying to do these. I think 10 days and ought to be is more realistic and maybe even longer than that. And then instead of just transmitting board and commission meetings to the Board of Trustees, which, as I say, isn't really done, I'd rather see them posted on the town website so the public can look at them. And if the board members want to look at them and they're on the website, obviously we can look at them there too. So I underlined in this proposal the things that are underlined would be the changes, and then I just put brackets around the sentence that says all actions taken shall be by recorded roll call vote. I don't know if we want to retain that or not. I don't think that they are, and I don't think the ordinance ought to require something that's routinely not done unless we really want them to record every single roll call vote at every commission meeting. I think that's probably unrealistic and probably a waste of time, frankly.
Is that a motion?
So my motion would be to make the changes that I have put forth in section 2860A, which would include deleting the sentence that says all actions taken shall be by recorded roll call vote.
Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second that motion.
Is there any discussion?
May I start?
Please.
I would tend to agree with Trustee Brownie on that. I know the UEB, Aaron Kaplan, I don't know if he's still here. Did he leave already? Gets stuff put up on our agenda center. You can see it on there. The agendas are on there. There's a spot for every other commission. Nothing's there. I know the Ecology Board Secretary has sent stuff in. Is in communication with someone. They slowly get things up. I know it's piling on staff's time. Is there a way to allow a chairman and a secretary of each of these commissions access to that one port on the Town Alliance Agenda Center so that they can place their minutes up there without having to involve staff?
There was a time when all of
Mayor
the boards
Sullivan.
and-
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
all of the boards and commissions were really good about it. It was before the flood, when we had training every quarter, everyone knew their role, and all of that was happening. I think it just really went by the wayside when staff wasn't attending every meeting again.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to go to every board and commission member meeting, so it just changed, and I think things have, we aren't having the same probably amount of training or level of accountability for those roles that they serve. So we can certainly get back to that. I don't know if I can give them a portal input, but there's certainly no reason we can't assign Kim or Ariel or the records clerk or someone to do them.
Okay. I was just trying to alleviate
Yeah.
your staff, as we've discussed since the flood. It's different lines. It probably isn't going to slow down. It's just the way the time of the times. There's just a lot of stuff going on.
So no, we can assign it, we can delegate it below Deb and I mean, it doesn't even be one of us to do it, so.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, I just thought it might be easier if the board chairs and the secretaries of each commission would have access for their one
To
site.
their website. I think we'd have to talk
to
to
upload.
Grace, our IT people about security.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the only comment I would have about the change, and I'm fine really with the change. I think the one thing though about how minutes are generally taken and the reason they focus on actions is you don't intend for people to write down so-and-so said this and so-and-so said that. And it's really to make sure that they understand that the important things to document are the outcomes. And so if we want to change it from actions to votes and discussions, I'd prefer it said votes or outcomes of discussions, just to kind of make sure that they don't think that they have to literally take a transcription of what the discussion was so they can remember who said what, because that's really not that important. It's really more what direction did they want to go. So I don't know if that's something that we can consider a wordsmith, or if you want to revise the motion, that'd be fine with me.
I'd accept that as a friendly amendment to say votes or results of discussions, which could be no action taken. I certainly wasn't intending to suggest detailed verbatim minutes.
I just know sometimes that, they want to make sure they're doing things right. And so they will literally take what we take and say to heart.
The Parks Commission discussed the skate park and no action was taken or whatever. I would accept that as a friendly amendment.
We try not to do friendly amendments. I don't know if this case the board thinks it's minor enough, if that's acceptable. Okay. Any further discussion?
Can I have one comment, please, Mayor Sullivan? I'm okay with this, with one potential exception. Is the intention to eliminate roll call votes for all boards and commissions?
Not this one.
Right. But I would assume that.
And it doesn't eliminate them, it just doesn't require them. Right now it says all votes shall be by recorded roll call vote, and that's not how the boards and commissions do it. Doesn't mean they couldn't do a roll call vote if they wanted to.
I think for at least 3 boards and commissions, it would be required. One being the PCDC as the Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Lyons, one being the Board of Adjustments, which also makes quasi-judicial decisions, and the third being the revolving loan fund, which appropriates town money.
Okay. Could you, as you were going to do with the prior motion, could you add that language to this?
You can add an exception for those 3.
For those 3, okay.
Yep. Or any other board.
And you might mention the Board of Trustees too. Ours should be a roll call because we're elected.
I guess can I just clarify? Because I even if we deleted that sentence, all actions taken shall be recorded by roll call vote, you're just deleting that, correct?
Right.
That's the motion. I mean, this still says a copy of the attendees, the agenda, minutes of votes or discussions. It still implies they may vote. They may have the option to vote. So I'm not sure if I see an issue.
Yeah, I guess by deleting it, you're implying that all boards and commissions do not have to use roll call votes, but in fact, there are at least 4 that are required to pursuant to state law.
Well, if you wanted to add a sentence that says that and list the 4, I think that would be good.
Okay.
So I think to Trustee Farrell's point, I think what we may want to do is, as we continue to work through this, is get to the end of this process and say, let's bring this back with the changes clean before we adopt it. Make sure, I don't know how the board feels about that, keep going. But because we are making some really substantive changes tonight, maybe that's the best way to make sure we get it all down the way we intend. Because I'm even seeing some things prior up that I wish I would have done last time. So, Town Attorney.
Yeah, so I think maybe the process then would be, if it pleases the board, to, after we've made the recommended changes, that to continue this item, bring back a new red line and approve the red line. And I assume it would be a continue without additional public comment.
I think anytime we put a new draft out there, we might want to continue to allow people to comment. I think it's just a thought, because I think if it's changed and they see something in there that we changed, and we are going to have a public hearing.
Okay. We can reopen
in the
public
past
hearing.
when we haven't allowed the comment the second time, we've had some issues when we made a change and then didn't take further comment. So we can play it by ear, but I think it doesn't hurt. But I appreciate the suggestion. So where we are is we have an amendment on the table and a second, and and good discussion. I think I'll go ahead and call the question on the amendment. And the amendment carries 7-0. Thank you. Trustee Farrell, were you finished with your?
I have another one. I have another one, but if you wanted to go into a specific order, because I think I'm much farther down.
I'm sorry. Okay, I wasn't sure if that was part of the same section.
No, this one is completed.
Okay. Before we move on to the next section, I would like to propose an amendment adding a new section to create a student advisory commission. I'm going to read the language. I'm sorry I didn't print out the copies. This would read, commission established with the letter A. There is hereby established a student advisory commission that shall act as an advisory committee to the Board of Trustees and exercise the powers granted by this section. The purpose of this commission is to, 1, engage young adults in local government who have recently reached or will soon reach voting age. 2, ensure the Board of Trustees is aware of issues of interest among the young adult population. 3, encourage, recognize, and promote the value of young adults in our community. Section B would say the members of the Student Advisory Commission shall have no more than 7 voting members and any number of non-voting members, each of whom are between the ages of 15 and 19 years of age. And C, the responsibilities of the Student Advisory Commission are to, 1, advise the Board of Trustees on matters of importance to student-age citizens, 2, recommend programs, initiatives, and resources for young adults, and 3, reviewing those town matters referred to it by the Board of Trustees or staff as appropriate and making recommendations on those matters. As you heard from some of our public comment this evening, I was approached by Ava, who is a student here in Lyons, about having an interest in us creating this commission, and I thought it was a fabulous idea. And, you know, I did look at some other towns who have done this and looked at kind of how they've structured theirs. So she actually helped me with this amendment in writing this language. We talked about the age group that we should target for Lyons, and I think we both agreed that we felt like it was best to target high school students first and see how it goes. And if we ever felt like we wanted to broaden the range, we could do that later to include younger students. Initially, we had talked about potentially expanding it to older students, even through college, but we kind of felt we might have a hard time getting them to meetings once they move away and go to college, so we landed on this. I really thought they did a fantastic job with the public comment and appreciate them all being here, so I'd like to propose this amendment for tonight. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
Can I add an amendment?
Sure.
I'd like to change your C to a D and make C, and I'm not as fancy as everybody else pre-typing it and passing it out to everybody, so sorry. The C would read, each member will be assigned a liaison role to one of the other boards and commissions so as to report back to this commission of the ongoings of each commission and how it plays a role in the governing of the town of Lyons.
Okay. I didn't quite get all that, but I agree with this. And is there a second for the amendment to the amendment?
I'll second.
Okay, so could you please read it one more time? Sorry.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Each member will be assigned a liaison role to one of the other boards and commissions so as to report back to this commission of the ongoings of each commission and how it plays a role in the governing of the town of Lyons. And if you want to change the wording to make it's fine, but that's the gist of what I'm getting at.
Got it.
Trustee Carabas, could you send that language to staff as well?
I can crumble it and throw it. Does that count? No? Yeah, I could. Yes, I will.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any further discussion on that proposed amendment? Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm sorry. It's for another one.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. So this is for the amendment to the amendment. I'll call for that vote. And the vote carries 7-0. Is there further discussion on the original amendment?
Yes. I have an additional item to add at the end, which will be the whatever letter that is now.
Okay.
Which would read, actively engage young adults in efforts to enhance the status of the community of Lyons including but not limited to the physical, sports, recreational, arts, and environmental status.
Is that for section A? Like here, under, or is it down here?
Number 4.
Yeah,
Oh,
number
I see.
4.
Okay, down there below. Would you mind just reading it one more time?
Yes, and I did give a copy to
You've
town
got
attorney.
it. Okay, great.
Actively engage young adults in efforts to enhance the status of the community of Lyons, including but not limited to the physical, sports, recreational, arts, and environmental status. Or should be statuses, I guess.
All right, is there a second for the motion?
I will second that.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? Second amendment, I should call it. Okay, I'll call for the vote on that. And it's approved 7-0. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
I did have one question. If prior to us accepting the final red line, if we could get feedback from the students who originally proposed on the amendments that we just made.
I'm sure they'd be happy to give us some feedback. You don't have to do it right now. Well,
At the next
it's going to come
meeting.
back again,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay. Trustee Farrell.
I would like to make an amendment. I move that the ages of the members in B read as following. Student advisory commissions shall have no more than 7 voting members and any number of appointed non-voting members, each of whom are between 14 and 19 years of age. At minimum, students must be in high school or equivalent academic program. The reason I am making the suggestion is because I do think there are a number of freshmen in high school who are 14 and don't turn 15 until summer or even fall of their sophomore year. I think the maturity level of freshman 14-year-olds is significant enough to be qualified for this program. I am hesitant to say that there are plenty of 14-year-olds that are in 8th grade. The maturity level between 8th and 9th grade is significant enough that I added that I think that they should be 14 years old in high school or equivalent. So I would like it to be 14 instead of 15 is my recommendation.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. I completely agree with everything you just said.
And I will support that amendment as well. I think the intent here was to really focus on high school, and I think as long as that's captured, I think the age is the least kind of important component of that. So I think that's a great change.
Not to make an amendment to this part just now, but one thought was later perhaps the board could come back and say, we would like to include 14-year-olds or groups as non-voting members perhaps at some other point, but they can just make that decision.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Second amendment? Actually, not second. I don't know what to call it. It's
Third.
the amendment to the second degree. So it's not the second, but you know what I'm saying. It's an amendment to an amendment. Okay. Call for the vote on that amendment.
Well, I think we would.
And it carries 7-0. Thank you. Yeah. Any further discussion on the overall amendment to create the Student Advisory Commission? Before I call for the vote, I want to thank Ava particularly and all the students who came tonight and spoke on this. I think this is probably one of the best investments we could ever make in our community, this commission. And I'm super, I think 10 years from now, we may come back and say our town is in such better hands because the kids got involved younger. And I think it's just a great opportunity. I think we will get as much out of this as I know that you all will. So thank you very much for your initiative on this effort. So I will call for the vote on the overall amendment. And it passes 7-0. Congratulations. Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and continue on now with the rest of the sections. Okay, so we are on section 2850. Any changes to that? All right, and the next one, oh no, I'm sorry, I backed us up to the wrong section.
2812.
We are at the Lions Arts and Humanities Commission. Are there any changes in this section? Hearing none. 28120, Board of Adjustments. This one is proposing to increase the number of members from 5 to 7. Is there any staff comment on this? This was actually a recommendation from staff. I think there is a minimum number of votes required to pass certain things, and if you are missing one person, it prohibits them from actually hearing the application. So I support that. I do have an amendment in this section. I think for the Board of Adjustments who's applying our town code, I think it's helpful if they have a minimum 1-year residency requirement. I'm going to make that same proposal for the Planning and Development Commission later on, but I think for this one and the PCDC, since they are making some pretty significant decisions, I think it's important to live here for at least a year before you're appointed to this commission. So I would make that amendment motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Trustee Caravas?
I would almost like to see it go at least two years. Because 1 year you move here, depending where you're moving from, you're getting settled in, whether it's a new job, new career. 1 year, that's not that much time, really. I think, to really learn what everything's going on. You can immerse yourself in it. But some of us have been immersed in this for 3 years, 6, 8 years, and there's still things we forget, don't remember. I don't think 1 year, I think it'd be 2 years. However, on the other side of it, we also have trouble getting people applying for commissions. So I could be easily convinced not to follow that because of that. So I'd just like to hear the discussion on it from everybody.
Okay. I'll let Trustee Farrell go, and then I'll explain my rationale for 1 year.
I hear you and I understand. My question immediately was, how difficult is it to find candidates for the Board of Adjustments? And remembering still, even though it's been now 11 years ago, moving to Lions, it did take a little while to get adjusted, but it wasn't that long for the size of our town. And I think that there are people who could really come in with some solid expertise and hit the ground running after a year.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I think the 1 year requires that people at least get acclimated a little bit, but it doesn't make an extraordinarily long time for someone, for example, who lived in Pinewood Springs or Longmont, and has experience, for example, with the Board of Adjustments, for example, in Longmont or Boulder. So I think it then moves to the discretion of the mayor to say, well, you may have been here 5 years, but doesn't sound like you know much about it because you just go into Boulder to work and go to bed. So I think the 1 year is okay, along with the discretion of the mayor relative to the extent of experience and knowledge.
Trustee Wah, I'll let you go. And then.
Yeah, I would agree. I think once you've been in town for a year, you can kind of decide if you're invested in Lions or not. I think if you're not, you'd probably leave after a year because we're such a quirky, fun town. But yeah, and I would agree with Mayor Pro Tem as well that I think it shows the right level of commitment, I guess, and it sets a commitment that's not too stretched. So.
And I'll just clarify, it's only for the Board of Adjustments and one other board that I would suggest this. I think it's just because you need a year just to kind of get a flavor for what's happening in the town. But I also think there's an enthusiasm that comes with, if you're here for a year and you're loving it, you want to get involved and you want to kind of capture that too. And we have had some really good people. I can tell you I've appointed several people right at that kind of like 1 year mark. And it is hard to recruit people. And sometimes they're more enthusiastic to get involved because it is new and they see the potential where they're coming from somewhere. So I think it's a good requirement to at least say, make sure you're really invested here and have at least spent enough time getting to know the community before you start making decisions for things that impact neighbors and planning and things like that. So, Trustee Browning, and then I'll go to the town administrator.
Yeah, I'm okay with the 1-year requirement for those two commissions. I do want to point out, though, that they're making it conditioned upon living here for a year may exclude some people. I mean, we bought property here 4 years before we moved, and then Mayor Von Domlin twisted my arm to be on the library steering committee 6 weeks after we actually physically moved here. Probably a lot of people wish there was a 1-year requirement for that. But I think 1 year is okay for those two commissions, but it may exclude some people who, and I can think of a couple people now who own property here, spend time here, are fairly active in the community, but don't live here a majority of the time yet. But so I'd hate to expand it beyond the 1 year for those two commissions.
Town administrator.
I appreciate what you're trying to get across with 2 years, but I do want to remind the board that every case that comes in front of the Board of Adjustments is to be held on its own standard, never to be set as a prerequisite, never to be, determined by something done previously. So it actually, I think a 1 year could actually, it orientates people enough to our culture, but every case really is to be looked at its own merit and hardship and those things. So it actually might be easier for someone at 1 year before they have their roots too deep to serve on that board and to apply the actual rules to that board than those people who are used to what has been the standard in the community. So I would support a 1 year on this one too for you guys.
All right, any further discussion? All right, hearing none, I'll call for the vote. On the amendment.
2 years, okay.
Of 1 year.
I didn't make it, I was just.
He just made a comment.
Discussion.
So
Okay.
the motion is
Discussion.
to require a 1 year residency for the
Okay.
Board of Adjustments.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And the motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Anything else on the Board of Adjustments? And just to be clear, if this were to pass, this would apply going forward, correct? I don't think we have anybody under a year, but. Correct. So, I mean, just so anybody's, if they're questioning, I know on the PCDC that could come up, but. Sorry. Okay.
That is correct. There's no requirement under state statute that they live 1 year within the town.
Okay. All right, next section is Economic Vitality Commission, which has a proposed name change. Is there anything else in this section? Anyone else would like to suggest? Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I actually had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 suggested amendments, which I have provided to town staff. The first one is on C4. Make sure people wouldn't hit the same thing. I have to go back and forth here, sorry. Yeah, so C4. I was thinking we should strike the word create and replace it with actively foster. And that actually goes for on C5 as well to replace. And the reason is you can create a document, you can create even an atmosphere maybe in a room, but I think trying to get it as active as possible in terms of just actively fostering, which I think you can do, and then on. Do you have to do these individually, or can we do them as a group?
I think you could say replace create throughout with that if you wanted.
Yeah, for 5, it's replace it with initiate plans and recommendations to enhance economic environment. C7, I was just, in the first words was develop, use, and revise a comprehensive integrated effort. So it's replacing the first words with develop, use, and revise so that the commission has all of those responsibilities.
It might be easier to do them one at a time, I guess, then, if it's different for each, if you don't mind, just so that staff has
Okay.
the record.
So we can do the first two, or the first one, replace the word create with that actively foster.
Is there a second?
Trustee Drysdale, would you like that both in 4 and 5? Because create exists in both 4 and 5.
Yeah, but they're being replaced by different words.
He's got a
Okay.
different suggestion for 5.
Okay. Sorry.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote on that amendment. And it's passed 7-0. Thank you.
Okay, so then C5, I move to replace the word create with initiate plans and recommendations.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote on that. And it passes 7-0 also.
Okay, on C7, it's replacing the first few words, actually adding, develop, use, and revise a comprehensive integrated effort.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one?
Develop, use, and revise a comprehensive integrated effort.
I'll second that one too.
All right. Trustee Farrell?
I just want to be clear, because I thought I was on the same one. We're talking about economic vitality?
Yeah.
C7?
C7. Paragraph C, number 7.
So it's utilize a comprehensive integrated effort to communicate town's unique.
Yeah, and I would wanted to revise that to develop, use, and revise a comprehensive integrated effort.
I see. Okay, thank you.
It's sort of the CQI kind of.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I think we have a motion and a second, correct? All right, any further discussion on that? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. And the motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
And for C8, this is kind of a fairly substantial restatement. So I move to have C8 read, collaborate with organizations, individuals, and public and private entities located within and outside the town of Lyons for the purposes expressed herein for the Economic Vitality Commission and for developing partnerships for special events to attract visitors to town. And the rationale behind that is to make it one of the responsibilities of the Economic Vitality Commission to collaborate with a lot of other organizations for all kinds of things, not just events, but for promotion, branding, logos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Is there a second?
I'll second that one too. And you sunk my battleship.
Can I just ask you to clarify again what exactly you changed? Just which words? I kind of, a lot of it was.
Well, let's see. It's mostly after, within and outside the town of Lyons, for the purposes expressed herein for the Economic Vitality Commission. In other words, all the things above.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you. I was trying to type and I just couldn't keep up. So, okay.
And for developing partnerships for special events.
Got it. Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. And the motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Any other amendments in this section? Trustee Wah.
I wanted to make an amendment to C10 because we really will start up the Historic Preservation Commission. I know we will. So I wanted to suggest for C10, collaborate with the Historic Preservation Commission to develop public and private entities aimed at rehabilitating historic buildings and promoting historic preservation practices.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. And it passes 7-0. I actually would like to propose an amendment to C12, at which there is no 11, so I think there's a numbering issue there. But
Which 12?
there's two 12s. The first 12, the next one after 10, which should be 11, but it's not. I actually would like to strike the words a retail and recreational destination and just make the town a destination for residents and visitors rather than limiting it as to why it's a destination or for just those purposes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote. It's passed 7-0. Thank you. All right. Anything else on this section? Okay. On to the Historic Preservation Commission. Trustee Wah.
Okay. Get back to that. I wanted to add to this one, so it would be letter D, I guess, under Historic Preservation Commission. Okay, and I wanted to add leverage technology, social media, and marketing to create a database map, and maybe that's not the right term, of historic sites in the town of Lyons to highlight Lyons' historic tourism. Reason being, there's a group that's already working on this, on identifying all the historic places in town and mapping them and generating kind of a tour, online tour based on that, and there's an app that can also do that. So that is my reason for adding that in there.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
All right. I think that's a great addition. Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote. And that's approved 7-0. Thank you. We are deleting the Library Advisory Board. That's now its own, so that's one of the next sections. Any changes? I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem.
One other thing about the Historic Preservation Commission, and I just thought of it listening to Trustee Wah's comments, in that maybe a comment about the boards and commissions with whom it should collaborate, which include both the Economic Vitality and the PCDC. And the reason is because it gets involved with land use applications. And there was a fairly substantial discussion about that at a PCDC meeting about a month ago, about historic preservation specifically. And I don't have wording for it, so it's
Town Attorney.
To Trustee Drysdale, if I may, maybe add it to section C as a new numerat 6 to collaborate with the boards you just mentioned.
Yes.
Is that there's a motion, I assume. Is there a second?
It's a motion.
I would second that.
Okay. Can you just repeat collaborate with which boards and the Economic Vitality?
And the PCDC.
Okay. Any further discussion? We'll call for the vote. All right, and the motion is approved 7-0. Thank you. Anything else on historic preservation? Okay. So if no one has any issues with deleting the Library Advisory Board, we'll move to Parks and Recreation. Any, just a comment. It was noted in a staff report. Do you want a motion to delete the reference to Resolution 2001-17? That resolution that was kind of defunct for a commission that no longer exists or hasn't existed for 15 years, I think. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Sorry, I was busy trying to incorporate Trustee Drystad's amendment.
Did you need a motion to remove the Resolution 2001-17 reference in the Parks and Rec Commission, which is the one we researched, and it's referred to a committee that is no longer exists?
If we want to make a motion for that, we certainly can.
Okay. I'll consider a motion, or I'll make a motion to remove the reference in C6.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Okay.
It's a resolution it's super old, and it basically referenced a commission or a committee that no longer exists. So, and I think that the Parks and Rec adequately addresses this without that resolution.
So that resolution has outlived its usefulness,
Yes.
I guess.
Okay. All right. I'll call for the vote. And the motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Anything else on Parks and Rec? Yes. Trustee Farrell?
Okay, I've just got to get my bearings here. I would like to amend and add under responsibilities a number 8 to create and implement best practices to improve and promote environmentally safe parks and open spaces.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing, sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead.
Sorry, I mean, I love the concept. I worry a little bit about using the term best practices in an ordinance. I love it in an agenda. I love it in discussion and direction to staff and that sort of thing. But best practice is a fairly high standard, at least that, I would turn to the town attorney to say if, in an ordinance for best practices. So if you're not incorporating best practices in your discussion, then you're not satisfying that provision. And I'm thinking, something like continuous improvement or highest quality achievable or some term.
Yeah, I understand the concern that best practice could be considered a legal term of art, or the commercial best. Basically, we're creating a standard which may not be achievable in all instances. So, an intent to strive for something, some sort of qualifying language.
Can you just take out best?
Yes, we can take out best as well.
Or continuously improving practices or something like that.
Trustee Wah?
So I guess I have issue with the word implement because I don't think the commission is going to implement the practices.
Okay.
It would be,
the board's
they are
responsibility.
advisory to the, So what if we said research and recommend best practices? Would you accept best practices in that context?
Well, it's still a standard, so that, for example, if the, and I don't, this is going deep. Sorry. But if, the commission looked at 3 other towns, and one of those towns clearly had the best of everything, but we couldn't afford it ever. And so you're recommending the second best, and it's still good. It's still better than what we had. Not only too deep into it.
Maybe just practices.
Or in practices which improve, or something like that.
Sure.
Or,
practices to improve.
To improve. That's what. Recommend practices to improve. Yeah, that works to me.
Would you like me to read it?
I think you should withdraw your existing resolution and reread it. And I can read you back what I have if you would like.
I can do it.
Okay.
I would like to withdraw my amendment and propose a new amendment for creating a number 8 under responsibilities that says, create, research, and recommend practices to improve and promote environmentally safe parks and open spaces.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote on the amendment. All right, and it's approved 7-0. Good, thank you. Good group think. All right, Trustee Farrell.
I've got another one for you.
There you go.
Because I also used the words best practices in this one, so I'm going to delete them out and think this through, but I'll read it to you. I would like to make a motion to amend and add a number 9 sentence, work with the Ecology Advisory Board to improve and promote environmentally safe parks and open spaces.
I'll second. I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Can I offer that we perhaps put that in 8 as like a trailing sentence so that, and coordinate with the ecology board since they aim to do the same thing, it appears?
I do, although I feel that the ecology board, I kind of go into a little bit more details. Are you saying you want to take and combine 8 and 9 together under Parks and Rec?
So what I would suggest is that your current, the last amendment created a new section 8 which says create, research, and recommend practices to improve and promote environmentally safe parks and open spaces. And I would suggest adding at this point in coordination with the ecology board.
Create, research, and.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Just a comment on that. I like the concept. I'm wondering if we should broaden it to other boards and commissions. I could see the Sustainable Futures Commission also. Yep. And that way we don't say it's only that one, but with any board and commission. So if the
so maybe with other
be
boards
open
and
with that so that it's not limited to ecology.
Okay. So would you still like the ecology board and then other boards and commissions? Or just put other boards and commissions?
I mean, I think it's less limiting that way.
Yep.
We could get very detailed and say the ecology board, the sustainability board, and other boards and commissions, or we just say other boards and commissions as an umbrella. I mean, I do have
students involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if I understand what you're saying, I would restate this as work with other boards and commissions to implement and improve and promote environmentally safe parks and open spaces, period.
What I have suggested, if I may, Trustee Farrell, is to, I'm going to read the whole 8 with what has been suggested by Mayor Sullivan, which is create, research, and recommend practices to improve and promote environmentally safe parks and open spaces in coordination with other boards and commissions.
And then not have a number 9. Yes.
Correct.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so let's
just withdraw and then.
I forget. So do we have a motion on the floor? Or has it been
The motion on the floor is to be withdrawn.
Okay.
And you have a motion with Trustee Browning seconded, if you'll.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay.
And then I think I know what to do next.
Okay.
So I would like to move to amend number 8, that was just amended and approved, to read as our town attorney suggested, adding the words. Would you repeat it for me?
In coordination with other boards and commissions.
Great. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. Any further discussion? Good. All right. I'll call for the votes. And the motion carries 7-0. So thank you. All right. Anything else on Parks and Recreation? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the Planning and Community Development Commission. And I would like to propose making the same 1-year requirement for this commission as well. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. And the motion carries 7-0. Does the town attorney have a question or a comment? Oh, okay. Any other changes to the Planning and Community Development Commission? Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I have 3 items that I forwarded to staff, and if there is any feedback on any of those 3, that might shorten them. I don't know if there are copies. Are there copies down there somewhere?
You need more copies?
Yeah, I don't think anybody up here got copies.
One question, Trustee Drysdale, and then when you say identify and engage technical, legal, and other professional guidance, it means it's simply finding legal guidance, not giving legal guidance.
Correct, it's finding,
Yep.
it's finding it. So better term for terminology would be welcome.
Maybe to just engage consultants,
Okay.
make it more broad. Or professional guidance.
Okay, so the first change then would be C3, which would recommend develop, revise, and adopt the comprehensive plan, and just, which is defined as a document intended to satisfy the Colorado revised statute requiring statutory towns to produce a land use master plan. And it's just to make sure that there's that direct connection with the statute. And other broad-based planning documents in accordance with Colorado statutes and direction from the Lions Board of Trustees. And the reason for that is we have engaged other broad-based planning documents like Dr. BOP and some things like that. And it just wasn't covered previously, so I move that we make that change.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. And may I add an amendment to that possibly? If you're agreeable. Since you're going to add, since we are looking to add the CRS requiring the statute of towns, go ahead and add the section symbol in the actual section. For ease of reference, anybody that wants to read it and know it?
I have that up right now, and so I can tell you what that is.
Okay.
So Plan Commission is 3123. Looks like 201 at SEC, which means all of that section. So that would be the official statutory reference.
Would that be agreeable?
I think that's just a reference.
Yeah,
Minor
definitely
enough
accept a
adjustment?
minor adjustment.
Okay.
It's the seconder, and you are the seconder, so I'm assuming you approve. I think that's a great change. I actually had a note to expand that as well. You did a much better job coming up with the wording than I did. Is there any further discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. I'm sorry, I had my buttons, so it carries 7-0. Thank you. Too many buttons to worry about. Any further changes to this section, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, adding a new item, which I guess would be 8, is that right? Identify and engage consultants for professional guidance for development of plans and for finalizing decisions when appropriate, consistent with the availability of funding and with concurrence of the BOT. And the reasoning for that is so that we, and again, recognizing funding and availability of staff and so forth, that, for example, for the comp plan, trying to find somebody who can help with the comp plan and the way that the PCDC wants to have help for the comp plan, as an example.
Is there a second? Trustee Browning seconding. Just a quick question on the wording with the concurrence of the BOT. Does it imply that we have to have given some very specific, what are we concurring with? Is it what they're doing, or is it the engagement of the advice? I guess I'm just struggling with how that could get interpreted.
Yeah, I mean, I think the final decision on this would have to be made by the BOT, so it'd be only a recommendation to the BOT as to what professional guidance the BOT would like to engage.
Okay, so, for example, then, identify and recommend
Yes.
engagement of consultants, and then take with the concurrence. So I'll reread that in the form of a motion. I move to add a new item to the PCDC list, reading, identify and recommend engagement of consultants for professional guidance for development of plans and for finalizing decisions when appropriate, consistent with the availability of funding.
Yeah, and I'll assume that the prior motion's withdrawn and replaced with this one. Correct. Okay. And is there a second for this one?
Second.
Great. Thank you for that change. I think that helps make it consistent with how they typically operate. Is there any further discussion? If not, call for the vote. And that motion passes 7-0. Thank you. All right. Mayor Pro Tem.
I have just one more, and you can read there. And it seemed to me that while these things are kind of central to the purpose of the PCDC, it wasn't clearly spelled out, I didn't think, in the other line items. And that is, and this is consistent with the statute, I believe, I'm asking a town attorney, adopt or recommend adoption of subdivision, zoning, platting, planned unit development, or other similar land development regulations after satisfying notice, due process, and hearing requirements for legislative or quasi-judicial processes as required by Colorado Revised Statute. And would ask the town attorney to insert the specific reference, or as directed by town policy, Lyons Municipal Code, or the Board of Trustees.
Is there a second?
Second.
I would simply just change or to and, because if there's a requirement in the CRS, we must do it. And we would also comply, of course, with our own code.
Okay.
You don't get to choose one or the other.
Okay. Gotcha.
It's a minor change.
Yep.
We'll let that go without.
And for clarity's sake, the reference would be the same. It would be 3123-201 at SEC, which means the entire section.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Not, I'll call for the vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Browning, did you have a comment?
No, I just want to say, I agree with adding this. I don't think the town should ever approve a PUD unless it's been through the PCDC before it gets to the Board of Trustees. I think that's an important part of the process and shouldn't be overlooked.
All right, I'll call for the vote. And it's passed 7-0, thank you. Any other changes for the PCDC section? Okay, seeing none. Sustainable Future Commission? Any proposed changes? Okay, hearing none. Ecology Advisory Board? I would like to propose that we strike the last section or sentence in section A, which reads, "It shall keep accurate records of its meetings and actions and shall file an annual report." It's just redundant. I think they shouldn't have a separate requirement that's different from all the other boards and commissions. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Proceeds.
I'll second again.
Did you restate your?
It's just to strike the last sentence in section A, because it's already covered. Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. And the motion is approved 7-0. Thank you. Other changes for the Ecology Advisory Board? Okay. Trustee Farrell?
Pardon me. I would like, under responsibilities, number 3, I'm sorry, I'm looking at what I wrote now. I would like to change this. What did I do? You know what? I'm going to actually withdraw, but then maybe come back to this. I didn't write this out like I thought I had, so I need a minute.
I would like to move that we make a change in 9B, where it says developing best management practices. And just change that to be similar wording to research and recommend policies for adoption by the Board of Trustees to promote flood mitigation, river restoration, and overall watershed. I can't read health. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All right, we'll vote on this amendment. And that passes 7-0. Thank you. Trustee Farrell?
Okay. I remember now. I would like to add under responsibilities, I would like to move 3 to number 4 and in place create a new number 3 to read, research, create, and recommend budgets and alternatives of cost-saving programs to the Directors of Parks and Recreation and Director of Public Works for the use of environmentally safe application of products that promote the safety and welfare of the natural native landscape around town, parks, and open spaces.
Just to clarify, is it the same wording that is in the printed paper? Are you changing it?
It's the exact same wording. I have not changed in what you've been given.
A second?
I'll second.
I would just like to say the goal of this for me is it kind of really came out of the workshop that we had and some of the open the discussions from the general public. And it really is, I'd like to see that the Ecology Board present recommendations of budget alternatives. I think that they could have within their power to show that they can find a budgetary way to perhaps save the town money or show us what those alternatives are. Not that they're approving, but they're creating and making recommendations, some budgetary advice. So,
Trustee Waugh?
I just question who should they be making those recommendations to. And I guess part of it is the responsibility could shift who's making that decision. So maybe it should be to the Board of Trustees or to town staff. To the board, you're thinking?
Ask for staff's input.
What's that?
Oh, just don't continue, I'll do it. Staff have input on that?
The advisory boards all report to the board, and so I think if the staff have a different recommendation than the board does, they'll bring that to you as well. So I think it should be to the board, not to the staff.
I would agree because they're an inferior board of the Board of Trustees is the way they're created. So all the recommendations should be to the board.
Withdraw and restate it, just for make sure we get it clear. Okay. If you're going to make a change. Sorry.
I will withdraw my amendment and restate a new amendment. That 3 becomes research, create, recommend budgets and alternative cost savings programs to the Board of Trustees for the use of environmentally safe applications of products that promote safety and welfare of natural native landscapes around towns, town parks, and open spaces.
Right.
Oh, is there already a second?
No.
Okay, I'll second that.
Yeah, I think it's good just to make sure we know, everybody knows what you want and what their changes are recommended. Is there any further discussion for that amendment? All right, I'll call for the vote. And it's passed 7-0. Thank you. Anything else for the Ecology Board? All right, changes for the Utilities and Engineering Board. I have a question for staff. Does the Manual of Design Criteria and Standard Specifications for Construction of Public Improvements of the Town still exist in that wording? Okay. I just wanted to make sure it hasn't changed. Okay.
We still use it for all of our modeling.
Okay, great, thank you. Any amendments on utility and engineering? All right, next section, Lions Housing and Human Services Commission. Any changes to that section? Some of the more recent ones that have been updated, you can tell have. All right. We did it. All right. So I think the recommendation is to continue the ordinance to April 15th and ask them to bring the updated version so we can see it all one more time. Unless there are any other motions at this point or discussion items, we'll ask for a motion to continue.
I would like to see the red line.
A red line, could we, yeah, could I just say the red
clean.
line incorporating all the amendments and a clean, I'd like to also see the clean version.
We can do both.
Thank you.
That'd be great, thank you. Is there a motion to continue to April 15th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, I'll call for the vote on the motion to continue. All right, and it passes 7-0, thank you. Does the board want to take a short break?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion? Is there a motion?
I'll move to take a short break. 5-minute break. 5-minute break.
All right, we'll call for the vote. Oh, sorry, can't keep up with my buttons. Okay, we're going to take a short break, thank you.
Remember we did 2 workshops on this? Several weeks where you have a workshop and nobody brings anything. No, it should be in a workshop. Well, once you already started, might as well just go through and finish it. I mean, and you already read it once, so you have to start all over again. At this point, it was better to do this.
The agenda is the consent agenda. Would the clerk please read the items into the record?
Resolution 2019-31, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, approving an amended professional service agreement with OTEC. And this is a revision of a contract. Resolution 2019-32, a resolution of the Town of Lyons approving an installation, planning, and maintenance agreement with CoCal Landscape Services for services related to Main Street enhancements and beautification. Resolution 2019-29, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, approving the third amendment of a construction contract number 1 with Zach Dirt. This is for McConnell Bridge. Resolution 2019-34, a resolution of the Town of Lyons to approve the first amendment to professional services agreement with Inner West Consulting Group. Resolution 2019-35, a resolution of the Town of Lyons to approve the first amendment to professional services with NV5. This is a Public Works project. Resolution 2019-33, a resolution of the Town of Lyons to approve a second amendment to the professional services agreement with DHM Design Corporation project number 20F, Lyons Valley River Park Flood Recovery Final Design Project. First reading of Ordinance 1057, an ordinance of the Town of Lyons amending Chapter 7, Article 6, Section 190B, and Section 230 of the Lyons Municipal Code related to noise related to animal or fowl, and amending Chapter 7 and Article 6 of Section 50 of the Lyons Municipal Code related to animals running at large. First reading also for Ordinance 1058, an ordinance of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, amending Chapter 11, Article 4 of the Town of Lyons Municipal Code related to town parks. First reading for Ordinance 1059, an ordinance of the Town of Lyons amending Chapter 18, Article 3 to adopt the International Residential Code 2018 standards for roof access for photovoltaic solar energy systems on roof accesses and pathways for firefighters, and the April 2019 accounts payable.
Would anyone like to pull any items from consent? Trustee Caravas?
I'll pull number 10, please.
Any others? All right, is there a motion to approve the remaining items on the consent agenda?
I move to approve the remaining items on the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? I'll call for the vote. Sorry, I keep... Okay, now we'll call for the vote. And it passes 7-0, thank you. Next item on the agenda is discussion and direction concerning the single hauler proposal. We had public input at the last meeting, so this is basically our time to give staff some direction as to whether or not we want them to proceed. Could you just remind us of what the next steps are and make sure we understand the process again?
Yeah, I got it. Yep. So as we discussed the previous meeting, there's a statutory process we must follow if the board decides to move forward. We will be required to publish a notice basically saying when we'll be implementing this change in town policy, and that notice is required to be a minimum 6-month period. As part of that notice, interested haulers will be notified, and they'll have the opportunity to request an RFP if they so desire. If we get more than one request for an RFP, we'd have to basically issue an RFP to provide the services that the town will implement in 6 months. We will review those RFPs according to the process through which we deem required in those RFPs and select the most qualified candidate, and then off kind of the races from there.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Could we consider proactively to have an RFP process, or do we have to wait for someone to request one?
You could proactively do one as well. The statute is not clear on this point, and as I've kind of mentioned in previous presentations, very few communities in Colorado have done this, so it's a bit unclear as to what the proper procedure is. But I think we could certainly publish the notice and do an RFP at the same time if that was your desire.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to start the discussion? Trustee Browning?
I guess I have a couple of questions. First, for town attorney, how specific would the notice be, or have to be, I guess? I mean, we couldn't, do you have to spell out all the details that you would in an RFP in the notice, or is it just a notice that says we intend to implement a pay-as-you-throw program with the following general characteristics? Would that suffice?
You can be very basic. At the ones that were done by Lafayette, Sheridan, the communities which are all represented by the same firm are extremely basic, saying they'll implement a single hauler program on X date.
I guess my other question would be for Toby. Do you think it would be, I guess, first of all, doable, but secondly, advisable to think about doing alternative RFPs, one of which would include a curbside composting feature, and one of which wouldn't? Because my take from all the discussions the SFC had on this is there in other areas, in other cities and things, some curbside composting programs have worked and some of them haven't, and I know New York City suspended theirs, and my sense is that could make a big difference in the cost in response to an RFP, and just whatever comments you might want to make on that.
Sure. I mean, we can frame the RFP any way the board directs. So if we want to have pay-as-you-throw with recycling as one option, and then pay-as-you-throw with recycling and compost as another option that they propose on, that's something we can absolutely do.
Because pay-as-you-throw without recycling doesn't seem to make much sense, right? Because you don't get your diversion, which is the number one goal.
Yes, and the SFC's recommendation is that it does include composting, because that's, as you saw in our diversion rates, the area where the town has the most improvement to make.
But so if we got RFP responses and the cost difference was substantial, but adding the composting, then the board at that point could choose, well, we just can't ask our citizens to pay this much for the privilege of curbside composting, but maybe, if we're lucky, the pay-as-you-throw plus the recycling would result in a cost savings here, I suppose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And having those options, there's no harm in like framing it out so we get those separated as different options within the RFP. That's totally possible, doable.
Thank you.
Other comments?
Can I make one clarification? Looking over the statute again, we must provide notice with a 6-month notice, but during that notice must provide for a 30-day period for people to request an RFP. So we could say it's in our intent to issue an RFP, and then people have 30 days in which to request that RFP. But I think we at least have to allow them the ability to request the RFPs. That's what the statute says.
Okay. Trustee Wah.
I'm so torn on this one. So question for Toby that I think I kind of half-asked at the last meeting, but the schools were really successful in implementing, sustainable ecology programs with EcoCycle. And the community was not as successful with doing that through an educational campaign as we did. Can you just speak to that? Why do you think it was more successful with the schools than our progressive community?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I probably half answered the question. So my response to that, and it's merely just my ability to dissect from a distance, is that the schools, in addition to the education, put in place the infrastructure in order to increase diversion. So they had 3-way stations at all of their cafeterias and events, and they have composting that they have hauled away. So they've got the infrastructure in addition to the education, whereas for our general public, we don't have the organic infrastructure to increase our diversion through education alone, which is all the EcoCycle grant was. It was, we are going to educate about why it's good to divert. It wasn't, here's the infrastructure needed to do that.
That makes sense. And then my second question is, there are towns and cities that have done this and have now backed off and stopped the program. what is the reasoning behind that? Why do you think Lions can be successful?
I can't speak to that precisely. I don't know the exact reasons why all the towns backed off. I know that there has been challenges with recycling and organics, in that where it goes once it leaves a place. An infrastructure like New York is so large that they don't necessarily have the facilities to deal with the increase in diverted materials. We have one of the best recycling centers in the country that's able to sort through and sell at higher market rates because what goes through there gets sorted better, right? So it's a better quality product at the end of the sort. Therefore, they're able to sell that into the markets that are weakened just now, but they're still existing. With organics, there is one that has had challenges recently with the increase in organic single-use items, but is really looking for an increase in yard waste and grass clippings and all of that to make that more vibrant collection. So we have the infrastructure to deal with this, and we have a small community with we're not going to break the back off the recycling center or A1, our small community at all.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is probably for Brandon and Toby. But I'm a one-way customer. I love one-way service. We had the owner of One-Way come forward to us and say, I want to be a part of this, even though he didn't respond to, was it a request for information, I think,
Yes.
initially? So outside of the formal RFP process, is there a way that we can, I mean, he came to us and said, I'd like to be a part of it. Can we reach back out and say, what do you got? And I just have a feeling that the RFP might be too comprehensive for, I mean, they're a mom and pop shop. Western is local, they're local, but Western is much larger and has the capacity to answer to what we're requesting, and I'm not sure One Way does, but they may have some other solutions that are in line with what we're after.
Sure, and I just want to clarify on the onset that we did reach out to One Way on multiple occasions, right? We emailed, we called, we reached out again and again and again, and they never responded once during the whole process until after the presentation that we gave you a month and a half ago. So we really tried hard, and I was actually very excited to have them wanting to engage, and that's something as a one-way customer and a supporter of a small business I feel very strongly about as well. So I think outside of the RFP, I'm not quite sure what that might look like. We could potentially, we had in the RFI, if you had any other suggestions of how we can divert, please feel free to do that. So if this model doesn't work for you, let us know. Yeah, so we could potentially include something like that. But pay-as-you-throw model is really where the diversion comes from. So if you take away bits of it, it doesn't work together anymore.
Yeah, I think they're certainly going to have an opportunity once this notice goes out, because we're required by statute to notify every hauler that may be capable of providing this service in the area. So there's certainly going to another notification saying you have an opportunity to submit an RFP if you want. Once we've gone down this path of noticing you're going to commence this type of service on X date, I don't know, aside from the RFP process, what sort of options there would be for them. I mean, I'm not a trash engineer, though, so there may be some other option out there. But I think legally we're fairly committed. We could always decide not to end up going down that process, even if we put out the notice. But within that context of the notice, I don't know what opportunity there would be for them other than replying to the RFP.
And just to clarify as well, we did receive a response to the RFI from them that they said they sent by mail in December, and we received that after the fact via email, but they were willing to submit to that and answer all the questions that were included within that RFI.
Okay.
They just couldn't officially go into the process
Yeah,
at that time,
yeah.
and now the process has to change to go out to RFP anyway. So
Mhm.
they will have the opportunity to respond, and they did respond to it before. Not within the official means and mechanisms, but they did respond.
Yeah, okay, I wasn't aware of that either.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Town Administrator.
I did talk with the owner following the meeting, and he indicated very clearly to me that they would respond to the RFP, and that he had a new management type staff that would be helping with that. He also indicated he was the city manager in Aspen, and he said, I know how to do this. So he's got some resources, and I think it's a matter of maybe there was a gap in capacity at the time or whatever, but he indicated to me, he said, I will respond to the RFP. So, and again, you can put out an RFP, it doesn't mean you have to accept any of them. You could still see what you get and then decide.
Yeah, and just a comment on the, I mean, when you're a small business owner, one person quits and you literally can't do anything but keep your business running until you
it's
fix
like
that.
the town.
And so I tend to be a little bit forgiving of them maybe not being as responsive as we might have expected them to be. And I guess, I mean, I'll share a few comments and I'll turn it back over. Ultimately, I would like us to see us try to keep this, get further along in the process before we decide not to pursue it. I think we're in the early phases of people understanding what this means. I'm just going to share, honestly, I would love to compost and do what Coco does. I don't have time. And unless you come and pick it up from my curb, I'm not going to do it. I can't. I just don't have the capacity in my lifestyle to do that. I know I should, and we feed as much to the neighbors' chickens, but they have to come and get it. And if they don't, I have to at some point put it in the garbage. And I know we could divert more if it was easier. I think from the feedback we've heard, some of the things that I think we should go to RFP. I think we should just commit to doing that on the outset if we do this, not only do it if someone asks us to go and do an RFP. I think we should go to RFP and see if we could get some of the things we've heard incorporated into the program, whether that means bags instead of bins or bags and bins, or some options to help the folks who are really throwing away very small amounts to be part of it and buy into it. I would, hopefully we can get the HOAs to buy in as they learn more. I think if we can lower people's rates and help our environment, I think it's not okay for us as the people who are sitting here and responsible for really making environmental change in our community to only do the things that don't inconvenience anyone. We're not going to get there. And so I think unless we're willing to do some things that make people, I think it actually increases inconvenience for a lot of people. But I know we've heard from a lot of people they're doing this already because they're passionate about it. I think that's great. But I've also heard some of them say, I'm willing to pay more than I'm paying now because it's for the greater good. So I would like to see us push a little bit further before we give up on the idea. So that's where I'm at. Trustee Miller.
I just have a couple of thoughts, concerns about this. Has anybody figured out where the bins are going to come from? Is it going to be the cost of the person that has to pay?
In the RFI, we asked that question, and in the response we got, and in the response that came late, both said that they would provide bins as part of the service.
Okay.
And that wouldn't be a cost to the customer.
Okay. So that's great. That was one of my concerns because buying those bins can be very costly.
Yes.
My other concern is having 3 bins to put on a curb. And, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
For anybody, I think. I struggle with that idea a lot, just even housing 3 bins somewhere, because I'm not going to have a garage. I don't even have a yard. I don't have a shed. Like, what do I do with those bins when they're just sitting out next to my house all the time?
Sure. Sorry.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I can answer that as well. I'm not sure, is Habitat set up as a HOA?
No.
No. So that wouldn't have communal trash there as part of an HOA piece there. Yeah, so it's totally up to you. I mean, you can, there'll be 3 bins. You don't need to use them all, right? Like they're.
Well, then, in that respect, then I wouldn't be getting my money's worth. I'd be paying money for services that I'm not really utilizing. So I feel like it's not just me, obviously, that would be having those similar issues, but other folks, areas in town that don't have, big houses with garages.
Sure.
That can house bins.
I can speak to me because I don't have a garage and I don't have a big house.
Yeah.
And like, I don't have anywhere to put my leaves either, right? Or my limbs. And this gives me somewhere to put all that stuff and it get taken away, right? Like it's going to, every week or every other week, depending on how the proposal comes through. So while it's an inconvenience on one side, it's a huge convenience for me to be able to get rid of that stuff without having to find a truck that I don't own to drive it down somewhere else. So there's give and take with anything, but the convenience of having yard waste and limbs and everything just picked up from my front door, it's phenomenal, right? Like it's really good. Recycling can sit outside. It's not going to attract bears, but you do need to work out solutions for organics and trash.
I guess I'm one of those people that really recycles everything and doesn't have much trash, so I'm going to end up paying more for service that I'm not going to use. So it's kind of hard for me to swallow that pill when I'm already paying a lot of money to live here. And so I feel for those people out there.
So do you currently use 1 bin?
Yes.
So it would be, you'd be paying less, right? Under the proposal that came in, under the response, you'd be paying less for all 3 services.
I could get away with a bag, just like buying a bag in a month.
Okay. But yeah, for a person using 1 bin, it is less. Bag piece, I think Connie suggested that we should address, and I think we've heard lots of people ask about that, and I think one of the ways that we can address that is similar to just having recycling as an option within the RFP, is we could have what would it look like to the cost structure to include a bag system within that. Now, that can be something that we'll then make a decision about, because if that boosts the cost to everyone so high up that it's no longer feasible and puts the cost for everyone up, that might not be something we can actually implement within the agreement. It is something that we can find solutions for in the back end because of the small amount of people in town that actually divert such little waste. There's funding that could come from the recycling center. There's going to be a reduced impact on the recycling center. There's going to be money that comes from there that could go towards supporting people who have to pay more. I think there's lots of creative solutions we can find so that nobody has to pay more if indeed they are the lowest trash generators in town. But I think we try and do it through the RFP process first and see if we can find a solution there without having to do something creative.
Yeah, my other piece is the one way. I love them. They've been great, and I really want to support them. So I'm hoping that they get that RFP in there if this is the direction that we go. I would like to see actually. I know that the cost probably wouldn't be as low, but it would. I feel like if there were still choices of multiple haulers, but having that single.
The pay-as-you-throw structure?
Yeah, that it might actually still create some competition and keep the prices low. I don't know. It's just my thought.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Just building on some of the issues raised by Trustee Miller. Will there be that element in the RFP or RFI, whichever goes first?
RFP at this point,
will become an RFP. To propose suggested solutions for for customers who, the number of customers, I suspect there may be as many as 15 in town. But I do want to just introduce a note of caution. I really support, as the mayor indicated, moving forward with this to see what we get, as opposed to stopping now because there are, seemingly difficult parts of it. But I would suggest that we be careful that we approach this with the level playing field, because I think there may be some issues if we don't approach it as a level playing field. And I mean a level playing field for everybody.
Yep. And one of the concerns that I'm not sure if this is what one of the concerns that the team that evaluated the proposal that came in and have been working on this is that we did put out Western's numbers when we first presented to the board, so that's now public domain, knowing that they were the only proposal. So going to RFP now, when we said that we weren't, doesn't really level the playing field either, right? So we've got to try and make sure we mend that relationship as well, because at this moment in time, they may not even bid, right? Like, we don't know how they are feeling about that yet.
Could I offer, though, that I think what we would ask for is some alternatives that weren't in that first proposal.
Yes, no,
so
absolutely.
I think there still would be opportunity for everyone to consider it a brand new bid, essentially, with different scenarios, different variables, and enough difference, I could say, that we wouldn't necessarily expect to see the same bid come back.
And I would add that the bid that was already submitted, or the proposal, which was, we simply asked for hypothetical numbers, they even required numbers as part of the RFI, that was always subject to potential public disclosure, and we kind of made that clear within the RFI. So, but we need to follow the statutory process that we now know much more about, and that requires an RFP.
Were you finished? I'm sorry. Okay, Trustee Farrell.
I have a few questions. So I just want to verify, where would the organics go to?
So currently, the only facility that collects organics is A1. And so it would go to, depending on whom was hauling it, it may go to a processing area first before going to A1.
And where's A1 located?
I need to ask a friend. Can
Okay.
I phone a friend?
It's within the Front Range?
Yes.
Okay. Kingsburg. Don't know. Okay, it's Front Range.
Weld County.
Weld County, okay.
Yeah.
So that's good. And then I wanted to verify that the recycling itself is going to go to EcoCycles in
Yes,
Boulder?
to the Boulder County Recycling Facility that's operated
Okay.
by EcoCycle, yes.
That's great. So I was curious about I don't want to alienate the people that have gotten really comfortable with one bag. I super admire that. That is not my household, although with the amount of recycling that we do, and what I love the idea of composting, because it's not something that I am very, it's just not a thing that we can do right now within our environment at home, for multiple reasons. So that is very appealing to me, but I don't want to alienate the single bag. So one of my questions and thoughts was, if we had the 3 major HOAs within the community be a part of this, it's not an opt-out, but that they actually are a part of the process, then we've increased our numbers so that perhaps that would offset the cost, that then we can continue a single bag option. So I'm hoping to increase the mass in order to accommodate, the people that have been doing a great job.
So I can answer that in a couple of ways. One, HOAs we legally can't require because they're a commercial entity to participate. It's part, you cannot require that, and you may speak to this a little more, it's a commercial restriction, like Boulder, City of Boulder required that all commercial facilities compost that they all recycle and provide that, but they aren't able to require that they do it with a particular hauler, right? So there's an inability to pull in HOAs as a requirement. Now, there's the absolute ability to speak with the HOAs, get them to understand the numbers and get them to buy into and opt into the model, which only goes to benefit the whole and the mass in general. In terms of the baggers, I still believe that there's a way to meet those needs. Our goal is never to discourage people from more local, better solutions. I think I said it in my last presentation, those in our community that excel at waste diversion, have for years, should be held up as examples. And I think that same with organic diversion. Just because we have curbside doesn't mean that we don't, when we do get community gardens, hopefully in the Dr. Bob plan, and that gets implemented, doesn't mean we don't have local compostable volunteers working on that, making sure that that happens as well. This isn't instead of everything else. This is capture the most from the people who don't go to those extreme efforts, and then we increase all of those programs as well. This isn't but it's a big and. It's a capital letter and. There's no way of getting to this diversion otherwise.
Would you say that the majority of Lyons residents, not including HOAs, that there are probably a majority more people who do not compost?
Yes.
Okay.
And the survey data that EcoCycle did shows that as well.
And so by having that element and including yard waste, not just my kitchen scraps, would be significant.
Huge.
Yes. So I think we really want to look at this as towns. It's our global town environmental impact that we're trying to influence here. Because the majority of the people are not composters. I'm curious, how will this affect our recycling center?
It will reduce the usage, so it will still stay there. The county will still pay for the collection of those items, and the commercial businesses in town that use it will still use it. Some residents will use it if they choose to, but it will reduce the amount of pickups that we need to do, and therefore it will allow us a pot of funds there that we can use for other programming to increase diversion, whether that's supporting the baggers, whether that's adding more larger yard waste or limb collection or whatever that looks like, but it will free up some funds.
Well, so that was kind of my question is if we're actually using it potentially less, how are we going to have less fun? I mean, how are we going to benefit financially from that?
Because there's less collections, right? So right now, it's collected all 2 bins are collected 3 times a week.
Okay.
So let's say that moves down to 3 bins a week rather than 6 bins a week. That reduces the cost of that.
So we save money because of that in our own recycling center.
Yes.
I didn't realize that. That's great.
It's not going to be huge amounts, but it's probably enough to kind of get to the root of the baggers or the people who are, there's some money there that we can think about using creatively, for sure.
Well, one creative idea that I had that would possibly address the situation that Trustee Miller was expressing is for a street that, what is that, Park? Okay, there are multiple homes on that street that don't have garages and would have potential need. Is there a way that one creative option would be is that there is a specific dumpster that those neighbors can use community-wise with, I don't know. I hope that's making sense. I'm not sure how to express this well.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're meaning. So
she's not having 3 bins sitting on her front porch.
If there's not space on a standalone property for bins, and that's consistent in a neighborhood that there's a way to pull that into dumpsters of the equivalent size.
Yes.
That's I have no idea, but it seems like it's an
But if we could
interesting concept.
think maybe something
I'm not
like
the
that.
hauler, and
Sure.
I've never seen that, but I have no idea.
I don't know either, but I was just wondering if that's a possibility to get creative. So I think that with what Mayor Sullivan was talking about, I think we need an RFP that kind of addresses, because each of us had some individual thoughts. So it's different than the RFI that we were initially presented with. So I really do think an RFP is necessary more than just a notice of services. So we could really maybe pinpoint some of these and fine tune it.
No, all excellent input, of which I don't have the answers in the RFP with.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Trustee Carabas?
As the SFC's been working on this for quite a while, and keeps talking about, you know, the town's goals of sustainability, but always goes to the environmental side of things. Something I've somewhat harped on this board is to think of things a little more globally than just getting on one track. As an example, your food scraps, your compost, you go to Keensburg. How much fossil fuel are you going to burn a month shipping things to Keensburg than just keeping them here in town? Town's been collecting brown cardboard, and we ship it to the Oakland shipping yards to go to China. How much fuel is being spent sending a semi-truck over the Continental Divide? How much fuel oil in a container ship to go to China to make it into pulp, bring it back here, same amounts of fuel, instead of shredding the cardboard here and keeping it here and mixing it with our own compost. I do believe the UEB early on, and Coco can correct me if I'm wrong, when looking at wastewater treatment plants and design and adding to, instead of shipping our waste out, keeping it here, composting it, and mixing it with everything we were just talking about, nothing ships out. You guys haven't even touched it. You haven't given us any numbers of what we're really saving for true sustainability, which is saving the fossil fuels also, of shipping this stuff all over the place. I also have a problem. I know the HOA is an issue, but before I'd even want to go to RFP, I would want to have already spoken with the HOAs to see if they agree to releasing the town from having to follow their rules and they become part of the program as trustee.
Yeah.
For all I said. Because this town passed an ordinance charging people $10, I think, a month for water drainage off their properties to the storm sewers. There are some properties that hardly touch, and they're getting a lot of runoff from their neighbors. I'm one of them. I'm still paying the 10, and that's fine. I voted for it. If you're not going to charge all the people the same amount, and you pretty much cut the pool in half with these HOAs, I've got a serious problem with that. And before I would agree to go to RFP, I would want to see agreement from those HOAs agreeing to this and accepting it. And you talked about the infrastructure for composting. You said something about the grant. Well, why follow just what the grant was saying we're guiding you to do? What did the SFC do to get with the town of Lyons, get with this board, to create that composting infrastructure on our own? Didn't. UEB early touched it with the wastewater treatment plant in the composting of the solid wastes so it could be used. I just think we are looking at one narrow strip of a much larger picture that this board and the previous board, especially the previous board, talked heavily on the cost of living in this town and keeping it down. And everything we do is we're raising it. We've raised electric rates. We just keep adding and adding, and this is going to do it again. Of the public hearing, my numbers show me the people that were for doing this and moving forward. Two people for it were with SFC members. One works for ecology or works for EcoCycle. My numbers are much higher against it. My inbox, people I've met in town that I now know because of this issue, it's 10-1 not going forward with this. I don't think even going to RFP, unless we get those HOAs on board, should be done.
Okay. Anybody else? Trustee Browning? We probably hear from everybody on this one.
Oh, my question's sort of implied where I am on this. I think this would have been a tough call if it was go with what's in the RFI or not. It is close. There is a lot of opposition to it, but there's not a whole lot of people that are going to come out and express their support for something that lowers their cost by $1 a month or $1.50 a month. That's not going to motivate them to email their town board or come speak at a town meeting. And that seemed to be the case. And it's, to me, somewhat irresponsible as a town board member if you had a proposal that might have lowered the cost for most people in town and that did the ecological benefits, the diversion rates, to not at least look at that. I don't know if we will get cost savings for the majority of Lyon residents through the RFP process. What we're putting out is different than what we got in the RFI. And if the responses that we get back from whatever hauler or haulers respond indicate that to do the things we want to do to increase the diversion rates, it's going to cost most residents in town more money, I'd have a hard time voting for that. But I agree with what the mayor said. I think it's worth seeing what we get. And if the costs would go up under these proposals, and we can't find any way to accommodate the baggers, then we say no. But I think it's at least worth taking a look and seeing what we get in response. We're not committing ourselves to do this, but I think we almost owe it to the people, the majority of people in town who might save money for better service, to at least see if we can get to that point. If we can't, then we say no. But for now, I'm interested in seeing what we would get back.
I do want to speak to your comment, because I think it's a valid one to say, sometimes you get focused on, I'm going to do this, and I think it's going to have a positive impact, and then later on you figure out, well, gosh, we spent more energy and money dealing with the savings we try to create. And I don't really, I'll be first to admit, I don't know enough about the process to know how it all, equals out. I'm sure Toby could inform us on some of that.
I can definitely say that the process hasn't just revolved around this. The SFC has been investigating waste diversion in local manners, every manners, and we continue to plan to do so, not in a siloed factor, right? There is not a single goal of the SFC to move forward with this, but in all our investigations, this is the largest bang for the buck with the lowest investment cost, right? Like, it's the most impactful, but it doesn't mean we don't do local. It doesn't mean that we don't do all the things that you were saying, right? That's all and.
Well, the other thing I would say, I guess, to that is that even if we don't have it all figured out, I think we do have to start encouraging people to change behaviors that in the long run will make us a more sustainable community. And, I think if we don't start really trying to get people to change these behaviors, we can't deal with the next problem down the line. And I think we'll start to figure out what those are and we'll address those. I don't think the answer is, well, we can't make enough of an impact, so we just shouldn't do anything. That is where our whole country is, and I really think it's going to start at the local level before we start to see the greater, national solutions start to emerge. And I agree, we have big problems. We can't keep shipping things to China. We are lazy recyclers. We're all going to have to put in more effort. And I think with this, I'm willing to do the effort, especially if you can save me a few bucks. But I'm also a one-way customer, and I love them. And I want to see us evaluate our options again in a different process, and just see what we get. And we may not get there, and I'm not. I think we have to see all the analysis, and I think we have to keep asking these good questions. I think this has been a really good discussion to we're now finally starting to really think this through. And I think all we can do is keep taking one step at a time. And you're right, we may find that there's just not enough buy-in. I'm not sure we'll get the HOAs without the RFP process. I would say it's a little chicken or the egg. I would actually say the RFP process might help us get the HOAs, but I agree we should keep talking to them. And we should try to, do the outreach that we need. I live in one of those HOAs, and, we can start to have those conversations and say, we're still feeling this out. We're not saying that we're absolutely committed to this until we, get a little further down the road. So.
I want to make one point of clarification regarding the HOAs as well. It's not clear in the statute that you can't require HOAs to do this, and in fact, the city of Golden, who did implement a single hauler program, did mandate that the HOAs be part of the program. They only excluded commercial and industrial customers. And so this is just a statute which has not been used a ton. There's questions, but there's at least one model where HOAs were included as part of the program.
How long has that model been in place?
If you give me 1 second, I can tell you I have the RFP letter too. Looks like 2008. 2009, excuse me.
Is there a motion to direct staff to initiate the process, or any other motion someone would like to propose? Trustee Waugh?
I will, excuse me, I will move to direct staff to proceed with the RFP process for a single hauler. I agree with some of the sentiments that a lot of our questions and concerns are going to be answered through that process, and I think it's prudent to move forward.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Trustee Miller?
I just want to make a comment before we vote on this. I think it's going to be prudent for you to put it out there to the general public that we have not decided that this is going to be law, right? Okay, because people are going to think right off the bat that we've already passed this, and since we were putting an RFP out there, and all hell's going to break loose. So, just so you know.
I think that's a great point, that we're going to need some communication around this, that we're not necessarily saying we're doing this. We're taking the step to publish the notice, and we're instructing staff to actually initiate the RFP process. Not even, I mean, if I understand the motion, it's to do an RFP process and start the statute requirements.
We need to initiate the notice, which is required by the state statute, which gets published in the newspaper of general circulation Alliance, a newspaper of record, saying that we're going to implement this program on X date.
And I assume there'll be a resolution or something that will come to us with the language, or do you envision a next step for us?
It's up to you how you like that process to proceed forward. It could be a resolution approving that language, or you could direct staff to go forth and do it.
Trustee Waugh?
So I agree with what Trustee Miller is saying, but I think we need to take caution with that message, because we may not get back what we want from an RFP if the vendors don't think we're really going to move forward with this. We might not get the interest. So I just think we need to use some caution.
Yeah, I think it's about explaining the process, because there will be an ordinance at some point, and that's another opportunity for public input. And so I think, if staff could work on crafting maybe an e-blast or something that just says what it is we're doing and explains that this isn't the final decision. If we get, depending on the responses, we will initiate an ordinance, and there'll be additional public input before it's final and things like that. So
it's a whole process.
It's a process. Trustee Browning.
I think one thing I wanted to note too in drafting an RFP and having staff proceed with that, we don't have a sustainability coordinator now. Toby has gone above and beyond the call of duty in trying to keep this option before us since he's left the town's employment. So I can foresee that there may be some delay until you get the new sustainability coordinator hired and involved in the process. But one of the things I hope that would be a part of that process before we actually send out the notice and approve the final RFP is that there would be discussions with the HOAs. The Stone Canyon HOA president was here last time, and I talked to him after he spoke and after we got public input and asked him, what amount does each resident of Stone Canyon pay per month for their trash hauling service. It's hard for me to understand the economics of this, how I think he said there were, 79 homes, something like that, how you could do a contract for 79 homes that would be less per house on an individual house basis than a town-wide contract. Maybe for some reason their particular service does that, but I think it would be interesting to know, as before we get into this process for RFPs, is could the HOA individual residents save money by doing this? And that would literally be buy-in, or would they rather keep what they've got and pay more for the privilege of what they get now? I mean, and I don't think many of the HOA residents have been presented with those numbers, because the HOA president wasn't even sure what it worked out to on a per household basis. So I think that ought to be part of the process once we get a new sustainability coordinator hired. Let's see if we can figure out with the HOAs how much are their residents paying, so we can compare that to what we get back from the RFPs and tell them, hey, and I'm pulling these numbers, $20 a month you could pay under this proposal, you're now paying $35. Give them the choice, if that's what it turns out to be. And if it's the reverse, then you know what their choice will be.
Yeah, I would like to see us go out and ask if we could present at their next HOA meetings and do your presentation and explain it. I would almost guarantee you that all of those HOAs would pay less for their service, plus get curbside compost and recycling. And I had asked Brandon to look into this HOAs opting out thing, because I ran the garbage department out in Fort Morgan as the city manager there, and there was not an option. You can't opt out of municipal garbage collection, so why should they be able to do this if you as elected officials choose to have a single hauler? So I think there's a little more work to do there. And I really do believe that in our situations where there's groups, like Lions Glen, across the street, Lions Valley Village, the new Habitat homes, if they can do 3 small dumpsters for everyone to use, that will help the hauler and the person. So I think there's a lot to do here yet.
Could you share what you heard from Ramey about this also, and the impact on the water treatment?
I met with Wayne Ramey, who is our wastewater treatment plant operator, and he said to me, Victoria, if we weren't even on the subject, we weren't talking single hauler, we were talking BOD. And he said, if there was one thing I could do in your town, it would be to disconnect every single person's garbage disposal. He said, for every 1 pound of vegetables going down the sink, or food waste, creates 5 pounds of BOD at the plant. Wow. So he said that's the one thing you could do to save your wastewater plant, is to compost citywide. He told me that just Friday. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty impactful. So he said, and it's most of our HOA homeowners that are probably using that garbage disposal 3 or 4 times a day. And no, seriously. And he said, that's what's giving your wastewater treatment plant its huge issues above just the obvious, some of the restaurants and other places that we know just create a lot of grease, oil, fats, and BOD. So he said that'd be the one thing I would do, and you would reduce your BOD significantly if you did not have people putting it down the sink and it was set on the curb.
Well, and I think that would be such an interesting study to do, to say if we implemented this and reduced and began measuring the composting, maybe we even get to reduce the wastewater rates at some point, because we're not hauling, you know what I mean? It could end up being that this ends up being an economical
I was really shocked, because he just brought
impact
it up himself.
that we didn't expect, that I don't know. We'll have to get a lot further down the road to see that. But all right, there's a motion and a second on the table. I'm going to go ahead and call the vote on moving forward with the notice and the RFP process. And the motion carries 6-1. All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda asked Attorney Dittman to give us a legislative update. This is something, there are a couple issues going on at the state that could have implications for Lions. And And so I brought a few to his attention. He's come up with a couple others that we might want to be aware of. So just to keep us informed of what's happening. There may be some we choose to take a position on, potentially, if the board desires to do so. And at least, if nothing else, you'll be educated if you go to the Sunday session with our representatives.
Yeah, well, thank you. Town Attorney Brandon Dimas wanted to update you on a few bills on the state legislature that were of interest. The first is one regarding family medical leave insurance. SB 19188 was introduced on March 8, 2019. This act proposes to create a family and medical leave insurance program known cutely as FAMILY, if you spell out the acronym, which basically works through a state fund operated under the Department of Insurance, which will provide for partial wage replacement for family medical leave. And there's a certain number of situations in which that applies. One, to care for a new child or a family member with a serious health condition. Two, because the eligible individual is unable to work due to an individual's own serious health condition, or because the individual or family member is the victim of abusive behavior. Or three, due to needs arising from a family member's active duty service. The way this works financially is that each employee and employer in the state will pay 1/2 the cost of a premium, which basically goes into a fund, which is designated as an enterprise fund. And then the way this works is that, money is deposited like kind of like a Medicare or a Medicaid deposit, and then it's withdrawn as claims arise to the state. One interesting fact about this bill is the way it defines family. So the bill defines family the same as the federal Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, but also has a couple new categories which are not in the federal act. One is domestic partners, and then more troubling, I guess, is that, or more controversial at the State House, is that it expands the definition of family to any other individual with whom the covered individual has a significant personal bond that is like a family relationship, regardless of biological or legal relationship. This significantly expands the eligibility, of course, of what one would be entitled to take Family Medical Leave Act for. Which is a lot of the reason for the controversy surrounding this bill. Right now, CML is taking an opposed position to this bill. They have two reasons for that. One is that it's an unfunded mandate because only half of the amount of money that needs to go into the fund is covered by deductions from employee and employer deposits into the fund. And second, that it does conflict with the Family Medical Leave Act, the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, as I previously mentioned, because the definitions are different. There is currently an adopted amendment to this bill which discounts the contribution required by local governments and small employers. And so there would be a reduced amount of money coming from local governments if this were to pass. However, the unfunded mandate portion of this and the FMLA conflicts have not yet been addressed. And so at this point, CML's position has not changed. Based on what I've received from CML, they do expect a significant paring back of this bill, but that has not yet happened. And of course, we can always keep you updated as this bill progresses through the State House. My understanding is right now it's just been introduced and it's not made it out of committee yet onto the floor. So any questions on that particular bill?
And I did forward this to Trustee Waugh as well and asked if the chamber wanted to kind of weigh in on this or at least review it. As a business owner, I can tell you it's a bit of a concern because in addition to, the paying in and the concept, I think is great. I do support everybody having some medical leave. I think really that definition of who you can care for is so broad that it doesn't really establish much of a bond as needed. They really could take it for any reason, essentially. As long as it's a human being, I think they could justify needing the leave. And being a community of only small businesses, how many of those can you afford to have before you have to hold all those positions? It could be really challenging for our community. So I think there's some things to watch here. Do you have any further comments?
just wanted to let you know that we do have this on the agenda for the next Economic Vitality Commission meeting, right? Did I get that right? And there are chamber members on that committee, so we'll, get their opinions and filter it back to you. And part of my job is actually managing the compliance with various state FML proposals of this type. And I would say that they don't usually go through with the progressive language that the Colorado one has. So I do have hope that a lot of that language will be striked out of the
amended, stricken, amended.
Yeah. So just a little tidbit, but some of the language is pretty concerning and stressful for small businesses too. So I'm looking forward to hearing their opinions. So we'll report that back.
Thanks. All right. Moving on to the next bill of interest. This one regards local minimum wage. The bill number for those interested is HB 19-1210. It was passed by the Colorado House on March 11, 2019, along strictly a party line vote, with Democrats voting for it and Republicans voting against it. The bill would give local governments the power to enforce a higher minimum wage. Currently, the state statutes place a prohibition on local governments making their minimum wage higher than the state minimum wage, which right now I think is about $11. This bill would simply eliminate that restriction. The statute also creates enforcement mechanisms where attorneys' fees are awarded for private rights of action taken on by private attorneys and also local governments seeking to enforce the requirements of this bill. Right now, CML supports this bill because they believe it increases local control. However, CML is advocate for some guardrails on the authority conveyed by the House bill, but at this time, I don't have any additional details on those guardrails, and I've asked to receive a call by Kevin Balmer on what those might be.
So this is just another one I think we have to think about. What would it do to our ability to compete? So we are surrounded by some pretty affluent counties or cities. And if they bump their minimum wage up to say $15 an hour, will Lyons be able to compete with that? I mean, some might not. So I think it would be interesting to hear again from the chamber and from some of our, from the business community, do they have concerns about that? It's interesting to hear CML's in a supportive position on that currently. It a little bit surprises me. But, I think these are things that we should really be watching closely and kind of trying to get some feedback from the community on how they feel about it.
So the next one I wanted to bring to your attention is actually I think a genuinely positive bill in regards to the online posting of public meetings. This bill actually has a little bit of an interesting history because at first it required local governments to post all meetings online, but then those people discovered who were sponsoring the bill that not all communities have websites. Or can afford websites or have the staff to maintain websites. And so with the help of CML, this bill is kind of flipped around. The bill number on this one is HB 19-1087. And this is the as amended version, which I'm kind of talking about. So it was originally introduced as the way I told you with, not realizing not everyone has a website. So the bill now is kind of has a carrot instead of a stick kind of structure to it, where it allows communities who post their meeting agendas online to forego any physical posting requirements. And so, right now you're required to post a newspaper of record and physical postings if necessary. This would allow you to forego all those requirements if you were to post your meetings online. And this one has CML support.
Is that all types of public record or just meeting?
Just meeting agendas. This will not change the requirements for ordinances.
Okay, just meetings.
Just meetings.
And just a note for that, Joseph doesn't charge us for putting our agendas in.
Was there anything else? Was that it?
You raise the minimum wage on yourself.
Right. Were there any others?
Triple it.
Anything else?
One final one, speaking briefly about this one regards using utility easements, existing utility easements for broadband infrastructure. There's been a big push by SS Park and my firm in representation of SS Park for this bill. What this essentially does is it allows existing utility easements to be used for broadband infrastructure. There's been a nationwide problem where municipalities and electric co-ops that have used their existing fiber for retail broadband purposes being sued by larger incumbents under the theory that that easement was unauthorized for that particular use. And so basically what you get is class action lawsuits against the utilities saying that, you know, we reserve some cut of this because you're basically trespassing on our easement because you're using a use that was not intended when it was granted. Several states, including the state of Indiana, have created statutory, basically exemptions from trespass lawsuits under this theory. Colorado's proposed bill does not go that far, but it basically creates a process through which easements can be perfected for the use of municipal broadband or other types of broadband without going to each individual landowner and asking for permission to be allowed to use that existing easement for broadband purposes. And so that's one, you know, our firm and is in support of, and mostly representing SS Park. But it's another one to keep your mind on as an owner of municipal utility. So,
Thank you.
I do not have the number in front of me, but it's one I can get you that though.
Oh, you know what? I do want to make one comment. I had one resident of Lyons who owns a company where they have employees that work all over as a caterer, and they're really concerned. But they're like, how do we keep track of what we have to pay people depending on where we're working as a caterer for weddings and things like that? So I think there's a lot of interesting things that we'll have to watch these and see where they go. I think a lot of them are still being amended. But it would be great to ask. I plan to try to go Sunday and ask Senator Fenberg and Representative Singer kind of what they expect to happen with these. But the easement one is a useful one, I think, down the road potentially.
And just to follow up on the question, the number on that one is SB 19107. And that one is still very much in play, being amended constantly. So not sure what the final product on that one's going to look like, but it's something our firm is definitely heavily involved in. So happy to give updates as needed.
Great. Okay, we have one item pulled from consent. Trustee Karas, item number 10.
Yep. Accounts payable. Hand check number 98. Yes, ma'am. Sorry about that. Hand check 98710, $5,600, wastewater treatment plant, HVAC, and H2O heater in a building in an area that was just freshly built, brand new. And what were the additional costs of the wet hauling we were doing for a week? Do we know?
Yes. The hand check was written because during that cold spell we had, the backflow prevention device in what I'll call the office building, for lack of a better term, the older brick building at the wastewater plant, backflowed and damaged, destroyed the furnace and the water heater. And the furnace was both furnace air conditioning unit and water heater. And so to be able to get the heat back in that building, we had to do a hand check instead of waiting for the next board meeting. That's that one. That's when we discovered, because we were looking for the as-builts on how those were hooked up, that we discovered that the Honeywell or its subcontractors did not do everything in that building that we thought they had. So that's how we discovered that. That's the hand check. The extra hauling was a fuse on the electric panel had blown, and the SCADA did not let us know that the basin was almost full, the waste basin. And so we had to call on that Monday and haul and bring that basin back down to reasonable levels while they repaired the electric panel.
Do we know why the SCADA failed?
Because there's no, the electric breaker didn't work.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah. And we're supposed to have redundant power
Yeah,
from
that's what's-
Longmont.
yeah.
And that's when we found out that the redundant power to Longmont was not working.
And this was all
Could have been
this.
very disastrous.
So what was the cost of the wet hauling? Do we know yet? Have we gotten a bill for that yet? Or are they billing another month?
I signed, let me think.
I didn't see it in my,
I signed one
AP.
for McDonald today, but it seemed like it was a normal haul, so
Okay.
I may not have seen that yet. Or
Okay.
it may have been signed, but not high enough that I had to sign it, that it may have been in Joe's authority.
so stuff not being done, hooked up right, did we get as-built indicating that was all done?
We pulled out the plans and noticed that it appeared that there was more work done to that building than what actually occurred.
Say that again?
We pulled the as-built for that building, and on there, it showed that certain things had been removed, certain things had been replaced, and what was there did not match that.
And unfortunately, our news people left and don't write about hard-hitting things in our town that people can know about. That's all, I just did that just to be kind of an ass. Put it on the public record that townspeople need to know what's going on.
There could be thousands of people watching.
I'll get a text in a little bit from my wife, and she's one of them. Yeah, just a concern. I was hoping, they'd pick up on it, write about something important. I mean, it affects us.
No, this is really important because.
What happens if that thing would have overflowed?
Yes.
Thousands of gallons of crap.
Absolutely, and
That's a problem.
I actually have.
As you stated the other
I'm
day.
scheduling a follow-up meeting with Longmont as well, because we're paying for backup.
Yeah, that's kinda what I'm
They
getting
just
at.
implemented that a couple months ago.
Yep.
We're paying for redundancy,
Mhm.
but we did not have it that day.
And we pay a lot for SCADA too, don't we?
And we actually, I do want to put pen to paper a little more and see if it would actually be cheaper after this happened again, because it happened during our planned blackout too. Do you remember we didn't?
Mhm.
Would it be better to have a generator on site than to have them as our redundant power in the long run over years?
Because we have natural gas. We have a large enough natural gas line to run a generator there, don't we?
Oh, I would think
I would
so,
think so,
but
too.
it has to be maintained, it has to be run. For a wastewater plant, it's like frequently, like every other
I've
day or something.
built properties with them, and you program them to run an hour every Monday. You can run an hour every day to keep the oil fresh and warm. Yeah, you can do
So,
all kinds of things with
I
them.
just
that-
don't have capacity right now to do that, but I will hopefully be able to do that soon.
Future.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Is there a motion to approve the item?
So moved. So moved.
Okay.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Did you? Okay. Call for the vote. And the item's approved, 7-0. Thanks. Trustee reports? Trustee Farrell, do you want to go first?
Okay. So, in going over the packets, I just would like to make a request to tweak our packet. When there is an Exhibit A, a B, or whatever, C, I've noticed that sometimes you'll have an Exhibit A, and it'll just say Exhibit A, but it's on a blank piece of page, and everything after that is supposed to be for that exhibit. What I'm finding, though, is when we've got large documents that refer to old ordinances, that those have their own A's and B's and C's of exhibits. And since I'm looking online and scrolling, I'm going up and down constantly. And I'm wondering if there's a way that on that, lack of a better word, title page of Exhibit A, it could say, Exhibit A for blah, 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 that's referencing specifically what's up above. From an organizational standpoint, I think that would be huge and potentially could save a lot of time going through these packets, if that's okay. So that's just a request. Does that make sense?
Let's see if we can do that. Some items get turned into us as PDF from contractors and things, and then that would make it, I mean, just it's another step to convert. But let us talk about it at staff level so we can.
Because I've noticed sometimes they'll have it backwards. Their exhibit, they'll have at their end of the document, Exhibit A is titled one thing, but it actually, I go through and I find, oh no, that's Exhibit B. It's getting really complicated, I guess. So if there's any way to kind of just think, yeah, okay, with everything else, right? And then I was just curious, has Lions Properties made any kind of a commitment for a date to hold a workshop? Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Unless you put something
I forgot my notes on that. Sorry about that on my trustee report, so I'm going to shoot from memory. You heard Aaron Kaplan talk. That's been a concern of theirs. They have a meeting, UEB meeting Wednesday, 4:30. Come one, come all. Ecology Board met, 20th of March? Didn't get much done again. A lot of time was spent discussing the, I guess, workshop discussion or the board discussion of with the weed group and everything we were deciding and looking at, and then trying to go over everything. The Ecology Board members are kind of at wit's end almost with dealing with the subgroup, and I think are pretty much want to be done with it. They were circumvented many times, and that really bothered a lot of them. So it was a pretty in-depth discussion on that line, so not much. They are still working project I mentioned before. I don't know if you want to add anything to it.
Well,
You had multiple.
I had some email exchanges with, I don't know if he's the chair or the member, just a member of the board, but the question was, are they official or not? And actually, because the ordinance says that you have to pass a resolution to create an ad hoc committee, which we never did. If you remember, it came about, the Ecology Board actually designated them as a subcommittee themselves. Yeah. And then we kind of asked them to come in and tell us about it. Yeah. And we said, we kind of were like, okay, we'll just carry on. But we never took a formal action. So the question is, do they really exist as a formal town commission or committee, ad hoc committee? And the answer is they don't, because we never took a formal action. So I guess that means, I don't know everything that happened at your meeting, but I think there was some question about should Ecology Board members be attending their meetings. Really they're a group of concerned citizens that took on an initiative, and they've been working through the Ecology Board. But I think the question back to them is, do you want to be an official committee? Then you should come ask us to make you one. If not, you're working very nicely as a group of concerned citizens who can continue to weigh in on the subject, which would probably be easier at this point. And I would suspect that once we adopt a new program, they can, I don't know if they'll continue to stay involved or they'll potentially, who knows. So the question is they're not an official, or we answered that question. Yeah. And I think they're discussing how they want to move forward.
And at the last EEB meeting, the board pretty much said that they will listen to one person from that group if they want to come represent something in a timely fashion. So that's that. Like I said, I had something else that was minor, and somebody left the sheet at home, so that's it.
I don't really have anything, but we were so tired last meeting that I hope you all saw the logo, the tourism logo that was created by N8 Communications, Mary Huron-Hunter, working with the Economic Vitality Commission. I love the ring of that new name. And our next meeting is Thursday, so I'll have more to report then.
Trustee Browning.
The Sustainable Futures Commission has not met since our last meeting. There's a group, though, working to plan for the May 18th town cleanup day. And they're working hard on that.
Let's see. Next, Housing and Human Services Commission is April 9th from 3:30 to 5. And we are having trouble, we need members badly. We are having, they've been having trouble getting anything done because we haven't had a quorum lately. For the last, I think, 2 months now.
How many open seats do you have?
I
didn't know you had many.
Yeah, I think there's, well, part of it is the time. They're having trouble getting the meeting time that everybody can attend. But we do have, I think, 2 or 3 open seats. So
I don't know if we've gotten resignations because I don't think you've had. Most of our commissions are pretty well situated. So let me know if somebody's resigned because maybe I just didn't get a name.
Yeah. I think. I can't remember her name. I know one person did. Okay. And she was. What is her name? It's been a while too. So it's basically there's 4 people plus me. No, there's 5. There's 5. So we have 2 open seats.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 2 more.
Okay.
PCDC did not meet on the 25th of March, but they will next Monday. But we had a nice discussion during the workshop.
Well, and the Mayor Pro Tem went to Dr. Cog for me next. So I don't know if you want to share an update or not, but I just want to say I appreciate that. Good.
I will say that I have a report that I sent on to the mayor. If anybody's interested, I can share it with the rest of the board.
Good. So I haven't had any other meetings other than meeting with the maybe possible new chair of our student advisory commission, which was really fun actually. And I will just say I'm happy to be the liaison to them to help them get started since I've kind of developed a relationship with her. So I'll get that off the ground. But other than that, I don't have anything else to report. Unless staff has any other final updates, we can do action items.
Microphone.
I'm sorry.
And then we need to draft and distribute the notice for the single hauler program and the RFP. Yeah.
We need to send Steve Smith a welcome letter to the BOA.
Oh, yeah.
Do we have a copy of his?
I don't know.
We need it for an address.
I can send it to you.
I'm not familiar with him.
It says PCDC, but
okay.
You can just use the
information.
I don't know if it requires immediate action, but I do think it'd be good to come up with a date, either before or after the cleanup day for the curbside pickup. People.
Well, I was thinking that and drug take back too. They should all be about.
People need to know when it's going to happen.
I don't have anything else. All right. Is there?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
I know we did this, and I have it in my calendar, but I can't find it at the moment. What is our next Laura meeting?
It is April 25th.
Yeah.
It's not in my calendar. Okay, I'll add it. Thank you.
I sent a thing out to everybody.
You did, and I thought I accepted it, but it's for some reason not showing. So that's why I wanted to ask. So April 25th. Thank you.
Just a couple other quick. I'm working with Ben. We'll be doing the administrator's review. She'll be gone on the 15th, so we'll have to do it the first meeting in May. So you'll be getting some emails from me about the new process we're going to try to use. He's incorporating some different mechanisms. I haven't learned about it yet, but he's told me he's going to help me with it. So anyway, so you'll see that.
It's electronic now.
It's electronic, and I think it'll be actually brilliant and a lot less work. And then we talked about setting a date for some strategic planning. So I was hoping maybe we could look at the calendars and maybe shoot for something in May. So just we don't have to do it right now, but maybe staff can look at some dates that are good for you and then propose a few options.
Or use that 5th Monday in April. If we can be ready by then. I mean, that might just be an option.
It's not going to work for me.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
tell you that right now.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe you can look at your calendars and just send us some maybe possible dates so we don't have to
Yeah, there was one other
do
thing.
it tonight. But
I would, if it's okay, I'd like to just go ahead and mention that I am going to be out of town from the 7th through the 19th of May. And then again, the 25th through the rest of the month.
7th through the 29th. Oh, 7th.
So I'll be missing the June 3rd meeting.
Did you get those dates?
I can email this if that's better.
That'd be better. So
Okay.
that
yeah, it's easier.
Public's not.
I know, but I say anything about June.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Yay. All right.